You've been lied to about peace. They told you it comes from changing life, from fixing every feeling, from making reality match your expectations. But if that were true, why does fighting what is only create more pain? Why does resistance tighten your chest and exhaust your mind? Why does control never feel like enough? The truth is simple but uncomfortable. Peace does not come from winning against reality. Peace comes when you stop fighting what is. For thousands of years, Buddhist wisdom has pointed to this quiet lesson. Suffering is not caused by life itself. It is created by our struggle with it, by saying this should be different, by rejecting the present moment and demanding another one instead. Monks and awakened teachers did not find peace through force or escape. They found it through acceptance, by allowing life to be exactly as it is, without pushing, without running, without blame. As you listen now, something gentle may begin to settle. Your mind may loosen its grip. Your body may start to soften. The constant inner resistance that follows you everywhere can begin to dissolve. You won't need to fix anything. You won't need to understand everything. You may simply feel the relief that comes from no longer arguing with the moment you are in. This is not about giving up. It is about letting go, not of life, but of the war inside you. This is not just something to hear. It is a quiet shift in how you meet each moment. A return to a peace that was never missing, only resisted. Are you ready? Let's begin. Before we go deeper, notice what just happened. A small, quiet shift already took place. You stopped trying to get somewhere else and stayed here for a moment. That pause matters more than it seems, because the suffering we are about to explore does not come from pain itself, but from the moment we turn against what is already here. There is a word that sounds harmless, even responsible, a word people use every day without noticing the damage it causes. That word is should. It slips into your thoughts quietly. It pretends to help, but underneath it carries tension, judgment, and conflict. It is one of the most violent words the mind can use, not because it sounds harsh, but because of what it does to reality. When you say, "This should not be happening," you are not describing life. You are attacking it. You are placing yourself in opposition to the present moment, and the moment you do that, suffering is born. Not because the situation is unbearable, but because you are now fighting something that already exists. The mind uses should to rewrite reality. It creates an alternative version of the present, and then punishes you for not living in it. Your body reacts immediately. Muscles tighten. Breathing becomes shallow. The nervous system shifts into defense mode. Even if nothing outwardly dangerous is happening, the body feels under threat because the mind has declared war. This is invisible suffering. It does not leave bruises. No one else may notice it. But it drains your energy slowly, day after day. You replay conversations thinking they should have gone differently. You judge yourself for emotions you think you should not feel. You resist circumstances you believe should have changed by now. And each time, you add a layer of tension on top of whatever life already brought. The pain of a situation is one thing. The pain of resisting it is another. The second pain is optional, but the mind treats it as necessary. It believes resistance is strength. It believes acceptance means weakness. But this belief is exactly what keeps the cycle alive. Notice how should always points away from now. It never accepts what is here. It points to an imaginary moment where things are finally correct. And until reality matches that fantasy, the mind stays dissatisfied. This creates a constant low-level frustration that follows you even during good moments. You might be smiling on the outside while inside you are arguing with life. This inner argument is exhausting because reality always wins. The present moment does not negotiate. It does not explain itself. It does not bend to your expectations. When you fight it, you lose energy every time. And yet the mind keeps trying, convinced that one day resistance will pay off. This is where Buddhist insight becomes deeply practical. It does not ask you to like what is happening. It does not ask you to approve of harm or injustice. It asks something far more radical. Stop arguing with the fact that this moment exists. Stop adding a second layer of suffering on top of the first. When you drop the word should, something surprising happens. The body relaxes before the mind understands why. The breath deepens. The nervous system feels less threatened. This is because acceptance is not an idea. It is a physical signal of safety. When you stop fighting reality, the body receives the message that it no longer needs to defend. Most people think inner peace is achieved by changing thoughts, but the body does not respond to thoughts as much as it responds to resistance. The moment resistance softens, peace begins to emerge on its own. Not as happiness, not as excitement, but as relief. Relief is often misunderstood. It does not feel dramatic. It feels like putting something down, like realizing you do not have to hold your breath anymore. This is why acceptance feels strange at first. The mind is addicted to effort. It feels uncomfortable without something to fix. The word should also carries hidden judgment. When you say, "I should be better by now," you are not motivating yourself. You are rejecting yourself. You are telling your nervous system that who you are right now is unacceptable. This creates shame, not growth. Shame does not heal. It tightens, it hides, it delays. Growth comes from clarity, not force. And clarity only appears when you see reality without distortion. The moment you remove should, you can finally see what is actually happening instead of what you think should be happening. This clarity opens space for wise action. Resistance closes it. This is one of the hardest truths to accept. Fighting reality does not change it faster. It only delays your ability to respond intelligently. When you are busy arguing with what is, you cannot fully engage with what is needed. Acceptance is not passive. It is the ground from which effective action becomes possible. Think about how often your mind replays the past with should. That conversation should have gone differently. You should have known better. They should not have said that. Each replay keeps the nervous system stuck in a moment that no longer exists. The body reacts as if it is happening now. Stress hormones are released. The heart rate changes. You suffer again, not because of the past, but because of resistance to the past. Acceptance cuts this loop, not by erasing memory, but by removing the fight. When you accept that the past happened as it did, the emotional charge begins to loosen. The memory becomes information instead of a weapon. The same happens with the future. This should work out. I should not feel afraid. These thoughts create pressure before anything even happens. The body prepares for disappointment. Acceptance brings you back to now, where action is possible and fear loses its imagined power. One of the most misunderstood aspects of acceptance is that people think it means resignation. But resignation is heavy. Acceptance is light. Resignation says, "There is nothing I can do." Acceptance says, "This is what is happening and I will respond from clarity instead of panic." The violence of should lies in its demand that reality justify itself. But reality does not owe explanations. When you stop demanding, something unexpected happens. The mind becomes quieter. Not because you forced it, but because it no longer has an enemy to fight. You may notice that when resistance drops, emotions move faster. Sadness passes more easily. Anger rises and falls without getting stuck. This is because emotions are meant to move. Resistance freezes them. Acceptance lets them complete their cycle. This does not mean emotions disappear. It means they no longer define you. They become experiences instead of identities. And this shift changes how you relate to yourself at the deepest level. The body plays a crucial role here. When you say, "This should not be happening," the body tightens. When you say, "This is happening," the body softens. This is not philosophy. This is biology. Acceptance signals safety. Resistance signals threat. Many people live in a constant state of low-grade threat without realizing it. Not because their life is dangerous, but because their mind is constantly rejecting the present. Over time, this creates chronic stress, fatigue, and emotional numbness. Letting go of should is not just a mental practice. It is a form of deep rest. You do not need to replace should with positive thinking. That is just another form of resistance. You simply need to notice it. Awareness alone begins to dissolve its power. When you catch yourself saying, "This should be different," pause. Feel what happens in the body. That pause is the doorway. In that pause, you are no longer fighting. You are witnessing. And witnessing changes everything. The moment you stop being the opponent of your experience, you become its observer. From there, wisdom arises naturally. This is why acceptance feels like relief, not achievement. You do not earn it. You uncover it by removing what blocks it. Peace does not need to be created. It appears when the struggle stops. As this understanding settles, something else becomes clear. You begin to see how often suffering was optional. Not because pain could have been avoided, but because resistance was added automatically. This realization is not meant to create regret. It is meant to create freedom. Freedom begins the moment you stop asking life to be different before you allow yourself to be at ease. And from this place, something deeper is ready to unfold. Because once the violence of should is seen clearly, the next question naturally arises. If acceptance brings relief, why does the mind resist it so strongly? That question takes us forward. As the struggle with should loosens, a new tension often appears. A quiet fear rises in its place. If I stop fighting reality, does that mean I allow everything? If I accept what is, does that mean I excuse harm, tolerate injustice, or give up on change? This fear keeps many people stuck halfway, hovering between exhaustion and peace, unsure which step is safe to take. Acceptance is one of the most misunderstood ideas in inner work. Many people reject it not because they truly understand it, but because they confuse it with permission. They hear "accept reality" and think it means agreeing with cruelty, staying silent in the face of wrongdoing, or settling for a life that feels small and numb. But acceptance, in its true sense, is none of these things. In fact, without acceptance, real change is impossible. To accept reality means to acknowledge what is happening without distortion. It means seeing clearly, not approving blindly. Approval is a moral stance. Acceptance is a perceptual one. When these two are confused, people either become rigid fighters or passive bystanders. Both positions are forms of resistance, just expressed differently. The mind often says, "If I accept this situation, it will never change." But look closely. What actually prevents change is denial, anger without clarity, and action driven by reaction. Acceptance removes these obstacles. It does not end movement. It refines it. Think about how the body responds to injury. When you deny pain or push through it with force, the injury often worsens. When you acknowledge it fully, you can respond wisely. Acceptance works the same way in life. You cannot heal what you refuse to see. You cannot transform what you are busy arguing with. There is also a hidden emotional charge behind rejecting acceptance. It often comes from the belief that suffering proves you care, that if you are not angry, you must be indifferent. If you are not fighting, you must be weak. This belief is deeply ingrained, but it confuses intensity with integrity. True care does not require inner violence. You can care deeply without being consumed. You can act powerfully without being driven by rage. Acceptance allows this balance. It removes the noise that clouds judgment. When someone experiences harm or injustice, the first response is often emotional resistance. Anger arises, fear arises, the nervous system goes into alarm. This reaction is natural. Acceptance does not suppress it. Acceptance allows it to be felt without being obeyed blindly. This distinction is crucial. Reacting and responding are not the same. Reaction is immediate and often unconscious. Response arises from presence. Acceptance creates the space where response becomes possible. Without that space, action is driven by unresolved emotion and often repeats the very harm it seeks to end. Many teachings fail to make this clear. They speak of acceptance as a mental attitude, something you adopt to feel better. But real acceptance is embodied. It is felt in the nervous system as a release of contraction. From that release, clarity emerges. This is why acceptance often feels like relief before it feels like understanding. The body relaxes first, then the mind follows. When the body is no longer in defense mode, perception sharpens. You see options that were invisible before. Acceptance does not say, "This is fine." It says, "This is happening." That difference matters. One numbs you, the other wakes you up. Seeing clearly is the foundation of ethical action. Without clarity, even good intentions cause harm. Consider stagnation. Many people fear that acceptance will trap them in an unchanging life. But stagnation is not caused by acceptance. It is caused by fear and avoidance. Acceptance brings awareness to stagnation instead of hiding it behind excuses or blame. When you accept that you are unhappy in a situation, something honest emerges. You stop pretending. You stop rationalizing. From that honesty, movement begins. Denial delays change. Acceptance accelerates it. There is also the fear of losing identity. Some people define themselves by their resistance. They are the fighter, the fixer, the one who never settles. Letting go of resistance feels like losing a sense of self. Acceptance threatens the story they tell about who they are. But what is lost is not strength. What is lost is tension. And tension is not the same as power. Power comes from alignment, not strain. In Buddhist understanding, acceptance is rooted in seeing impermanence clearly. Everything changes. Harm arises and passes. Conditions shift. This does not excuse harm. It places it in a wider context where action can be taken without hatred. Hatred narrows perception. Acceptance widens it. When perception widens, compassion becomes possible without self-sacrifice. You can set boundaries without bitterness. You can say no without hatred. You can leave without resentment. This is where many people get stuck. They think compassion requires self-abandonment. It does not. Acceptance does not mean allowing others to harm you. It means seeing clearly when harm is happening and responding without confusion. Confusion often comes from emotional overload. When the nervous system is overwhelmed, the mind looks for certainty. It chooses extremes, fight or freeze, blame or collapse. Acceptance calms the system enough to allow nuance. Nuance is not weakness, it is maturity. It allows you to hold complexity without losing balance. Life is rarely simple. Acceptance allows you to stay present with complexity instead of escaping into rigid beliefs. Another misunderstanding is that acceptance is passive. But passivity comes from helplessness, not acceptance. Acceptance is active awareness. It requires courage to face reality without turning away. It requires strength to remain present without numbing or attacking. When you truly accept a situation, you are no longer wasting energy denying it. That energy becomes available for action. This is why acceptance often precedes decisive change. People who accept reality deeply often act with precision rather than panic. Look at moments in your life where real change happened. Often it began with a clear acknowledgement, "This is not working." That acknowledgement was acceptance. Not approval, not defeat, but honesty. Honesty is the bridge between acceptance and action. Without honesty, acceptance becomes avoidance. Without acceptance, honesty becomes aggression. Together, they create wisdom. There is also a collective aspect to this misunderstanding. Many cultures glorify struggle. They praise burnout. They equate worth with effort. In such environments, acceptance looks like laziness. But burnout does not improve the world. Clear, grounded action does. Acceptance allows you to act from values instead of reactions. When you are not consumed by inner conflict, you can choose how to respond. You can decide when to speak and when to be silent, when to stay and when to leave. This is especially important when facing injustice. Rage can draw attention, but sustained change requires clarity. Acceptance keeps the heart open while the mind remains sharp. It prevents you from becoming what you oppose. There is a quiet confidence that comes from acceptance, not the loud confidence of domination, but the steady confidence of alignment. You trust yourself because you are no longer lying to yourself about what is happening. This trust changes how you move through the world. You stop forcing outcomes. You stop trying to control others. You focus on what is within your reach. This focus is not limitation. It is effectiveness. Acceptance also reveals responsibility clearly. When you stop blaming reality for being what it is, you see where your influence begins and ends. This clarity prevents both guilt and arrogance. You do what you can, and you let go of what you cannot. Many people fear that letting go will make them careless. In reality, it makes them precise. You stop spreading yourself thin. You act where it matters. Acceptance is not the end of the path. It is the ground beneath it. Without that ground, every step is unstable. With it, movement becomes natural. As this understanding deepens, another layer becomes visible. If acceptance is so freeing, why does the mind cling to suffering? Why does it return again and again to familiar pain instead of stepping into the unknown calm of acceptance? That question leads us forward into the deeper mechanics of the mind itself. As acceptance becomes clearer, another puzzle quietly reveals itself. If peace is available when resistance ends, why does the mind keep returning to struggle? Why does it step back into old patterns even after tasting relief? The answer is not weakness, it is familiarity, and familiarity can feel safer than freedom. There is a strange comfort in pain that is known. Even when it hurts, it has shape, it has a story, it has rules. Uncertainty, on the other hand, has none. The mind does not know how to stand on ground it cannot predict, so it reaches backward. Not because the past was better, but because it was familiar. The ego is not evil. It is a survival mechanism that formed when safety depended on predictability. Long ago, knowing what to expect could mean the difference between life and death. The nervous system learned to scan for danger, to cling to patterns, to prefer the known over the unknown. This instinct kept humans alive. But what once protected now quietly imprisons. The ego equates familiarity with control. Even when a situation is painful, the mind thinks, at least I know how this hurts. At least I know who I am here. Unfamiliar peace offers no such certainty. It removes the struggle that defined the self. And without struggle, the ego does not know who it is. Pain reinforces identity. It gives the mind something to hold on to. The victim, the fighter, the one who always struggles. These identities may be heavy, but they are stable. Peace feels empty by comparison, not because it lacks depth, but because it lacks narrative. The ego lives on narrative. It needs a story with a past and a future. Pain fits perfectly into this structure. It can be explained, justified, remembered, and anticipated. Uncertainty disrupts this timeline. It pulls awareness into the present, where the ego has less influence. This is why moments of stillness can feel uncomfortable. When the mind has nothing to fix, it feels exposed. There is no problem to solve, no role to play, just awareness. For the ego, this feels like disappearance. Many people mistake this discomfort for danger. They think something is wrong when the mind quiets. But what is actually happening is the loosening of an old grip. The ego resists because it senses loss, not of safety, but of control. Control is another form of comfort. Painful control feels better to the ego than peaceful openness. Control says, I am managing this, even if it hurts. Uncertainty says, I do not know. And not knowing feels like vulnerability. The mind has been trained to avoid vulnerability at all costs. Vulnerability means exposure. It means not having answers. It means being present without armor. This goes against everything the ego learned to survive. Clinging to pain also provides a sense of continuity. The mind likes to feel consistent. When you suffer in familiar ways, you feel like yourself. When peace arises unexpectedly, it can feel alien. Some people even feel guilty when they are at ease, as if they are betraying something important. This guilt often comes from early conditioning. Many people learned that love was earned through struggle, that rest came only after exhaustion, that peace was irresponsible. These beliefs sink deep into the nervous system. They shape what feels acceptable. So when acceptance brings relief, the mind may sabotage it. Not because it wants suffering, but because suffering feels earned. Peace feels unearned. And the ego does not trust what it did not work for. There is also the fear of loss, hidden beneath clinging. If you let go of familiar pain, who will you be? What will happen to your relationships, your goals, your sense of purpose? Many people bond over shared struggle. Pain becomes a language of connection. Letting go of pain can feel like letting go of belonging. This fear is rarely conscious. It operates quietly, steering the mind back to what it knows, even if what it knows hurts. The ego also prefers pain because pain confirms its worldview. If you believe life is hard, suffering reinforces that belief. Peace challenges it. And beliefs, once formed, defend themselves fiercely. Uncertainty threatens belief systems. It opens space where old assumptions dissolve. This can feel destabilizing. The mind reacts by reaching for something solid, even if that solidity is painful. Another layer is control over meaning. Pain can be explained. It can be analyzed. It can be blamed on someone or something. Uncertainty cannot. It asks you to stay without explanation. For the ego, this feels intolerable. Staying without explanation requires trust. Trust in life. Trust in awareness, trust in the process. The ego was never designed for trust. It was designed for defense. This is why acceptance feels like stepping into the unknown. You are no longer guided by old maps. The mind panics and looks for landmarks. Pain provides landmarks. Peace does not. There is also a biochemical aspect. The body becomes accustomed to stress hormones. Chronic stress creates a baseline that feels normal. When calm appears, it can feel unsettling. The nervous system does not recognize it as home yet. This is why people sometimes feel restless when things are finally okay. They create problems unconsciously to return to the familiar state of tension. Not because they enjoy suffering, but because their system is conditioned to it. Uncertainty requires patience. Pain demands attention. The mind prefers what demands attention because it reinforces importance. Quiet peace feels insignificant to the ego, even though it is deeply nourishing. The ego measures value through intensity. Pain is intense. Peace is subtle. Subtlety is easily overlooked, yet subtlety is where wisdom lives. Letting go of pain means letting go of certainty about who you are. The ego clings because it fears dissolution, but what dissolves is not awareness. It is the story wrapped around it. Awareness does not disappear in peace. It expands, but expansion feels like loss to a structure built on boundaries. This is why Buddhist teachings emphasize gentle observation rather than forceful change. Forcing the ego to let go only strengthens it. Seeing its patterns with kindness allows them to loosen naturally. When you notice the mind returning to old pain, do not judge it. Judgment adds another layer of struggle. Instead, notice the familiarity, notice the comfort hidden inside discomfort. This awareness itself begins to break the spell. The mind clings to pain because it fears emptiness. But emptiness is not absence, it is openness, it is space. And space allows new forms of being to emerge. Peace feels unfamiliar because it asks nothing from you. No performance, no identity, no struggle, just presence. The ego does not know how to exist there, so it resists. This resistance is not personal, it is mechanical, it is learned. And what is learned can be unlearned not by force, but by understanding. As understanding deepens, the pull of familiar pain weakens, not all at once, gradually. Each time you choose presence over narrative, awareness over reaction, the mind learns a new reference point. Peace slowly becomes familiar. Not exciting, not dramatic, just stable, and with stability comes trust. Trust allows you to rest in uncertainty without fear. It allows you to meet life without armor. It allows you to stop clinging to pain as proof of existence. When pain is no longer needed to define you, something else begins to appear. A quiet sense of being that does not depend on struggle. This sense does not need certainty. It is at home in change. And as this becomes clearer, another illusion begins to unravel. The belief that control is necessary for safety. That illusion has shaped much of human suffering. And seeing through it opens the next door. As the grip of familiar pain begins to loosen, something else becomes visible beneath it. A constant effort, a silent tension, a habit so old it feels like part of you, the need to control. It once kept you safe, now it keeps you tired. There is a reason control feels natural. It did not appear randomly. It was learned at a time when uncertainty truly was dangerous. When not knowing could lead to harm, when being alert, prepared and vigilant meant survival, the nervous system adapted. It learned to anticipate, to manage outcomes before they happened, to stay one step ahead of life. That strategy worked. For a time. But the body does not know when the danger has passed unless it is shown. It keeps using the same tools long after the environment has changed. Control became a habit, then an identity, then a prison. Control promises safety. It whispers, if I manage everything well enough, nothing bad will happen. If I plan enough, think enough, worry enough, I will be prepared. But what it actually creates is a state of constant alertness. The nervous system never rests because it believes rest is risky. This is why control feels exhausting. It requires continuous effort. The mind scans for problems even in calm moments. The body stays slightly tense even when there is no threat. Over time, this low-grade stress becomes the background of life. You forget what ease feels like. The illusion of control is convincing because it sometimes works. You plan and things go smoothly. You prepare and avoid mistakes. These moments reinforce the belief that control equals competence. But what is missed is the cost. The cost is carried quietly in the body. The shoulders that never fully drop. The jaw that stays tight. The shallow breath. These are not personality traits. They are signals. The nervous system is saying, I am still working. Control also narrows perception. When you are focused on managing outcomes, you stop seeing what is actually happening. You see threats, not possibilities. You see problems, not processes. Life becomes something to handle rather than something to experience. This narrowing creates a sense of separation. You stand apart from life, trying to direct it instead of participating in it. This separation is subtle, but it is the root of much loneliness. You are always doing something to life, never with it. The need for control also feeds the ego. It gives the ego a job, a role, the manager, the fixer, the one who knows. Letting go of control feels like becoming irresponsible, even when control is no longer effective. But there is a difference between responsibility and control. Responsibility responds to what is needed now. Control tries to predict and dominate what might happen later. Responsibility is flexible. Control is rigid. Rigidity is what exhausts the system. Life is fluid. When you try to meet fluidity with rigidity, tension is inevitable. The body pays the price. Control also creates disappointment. No matter how well you plan, reality has its own intelligence. When things deviate from your expectations, frustration arises. You feel betrayed by life, even though life never agreed to your plan. This betrayal deepens resistance. You try harder, you tighten your grip. The cycle continues. The mind believes control prevents pain, but often it only delays it or reshapes it. Instead of sharp pain that passes, you experience dull stress that lingers. Instead of fear that moves through, you carry anxiety that hums constantly. The nervous system was not designed for constant management. It was designed for response. There is a difference. Response is situational. Control is continuous. When the system never returns to baseline, fatigue becomes chronic. Emotional resilience weakens. Small challenges feel overwhelming. This is not a failure of character. It is a biological consequence of prolonged tension. Many people mistake this exhaustion for laziness or lack of motivation. They push harder. They apply more control. This only deepens the problem. Letting go of control does not mean letting chaos rule. It means allowing life to have its own movement while you stay present. It means trusting your ability to respond rather than trying to predict everything. Trust is difficult because it requires uncertainty. Control avoids uncertainty at all costs. But uncertainty is not the enemy. It is the natural state of life. The body relaxes when it feels supported by awareness rather than effort. When you stop micromanaging experience, the nervous system receives a signal that it is safe to soften. This softening can feel strange at first. The mind may interpret it as losing focus, but what is actually happening is a shift from forced attention to natural attention. Natural attention is effortless. It arises when you are present. Forced attention requires strain. Control relies on forced attention. Another cost of control is loss of joy. Joy cannot be scheduled. It appears spontaneously. When the mind is busy managing, it misses these moments. Even when good things happen, the mind is already preparing for the next problem. Control also interferes with relationships. When you try to manage people, even subtly, trust erodes. Others feel it. They may comply, but connection weakens. True connection requires presence, not management. The illusion of control also hides fear. Beneath the need to control is often the belief that you cannot handle what arises. Control says, I must prevent this because I cannot meet it. Letting go reveals a deeper truth. You are more capable than you think. Capability is not about predicting. It is about presence. When you are present, responses arise naturally. You do not need to plan them in advance. This is why moments of crisis sometimes bring clarity. Control drops because it cannot keep up. Presence takes over. People often act wisely in these moments, surprising themselves. This wisdom was always there, but control drowned it out. The ego resists letting go because control gives it relevance. Without control, the ego feels unnecessary. But what disappears is not intelligence. It is interference. Intelligence operates best when it is not forced. When you stop controlling, you do not become passive. You become attuned. Attunement is sensitivity to what is actually happening. It allows you to move with life rather than against it. This movement feels lighter because it uses less energy. The body recognizes this immediately. Breathing deepens, muscles release. The heart rate stabilizes. These are not side effects. They are signs that the system is returning to balance. Control also distorts time. You live ahead of the moment, preparing for futures that may never arrive. This creates anxiety. Acceptance brings you back to now, where life is manageable. Most of what you fear never happens. But the body experiences the fear anyway because control rehearses it endlessly. Letting go ends this rehearsal. There is also grief hidden in releasing control. You may realize how long you have been tense, how much effort you have spent trying to manage the uncontrollable. This grief is part of healing. Allow it. Do not control the grief. Let it move. It is the body releasing old armor. Control once protected you when you had fewer resources, less power, less awareness. You needed it. It was intelligent. Honoring this prevents shame, but survival strategies must evolve. What protects at one stage can harm at another. Wisdom is knowing when to thank a strategy and let it go. Letting go of control does not happen all at once. It happens in moments. Small decisions to stop tightening, to stop rehearsing, to stop managing what is not here. Each moment of release teaches the nervous system something new. That safety does not depend on control. That presence is enough. As control loosens its grip, something unexpected begins to happen. The emotions you once tried to manage so tightly start to move on their own, and this is often where a new confusion appears. If I am not controlling my emotions, will they take over? If I allow them, will they define me? This question sits quietly beneath many people's fear of acceptance. Most suffering around emotions does not come from what is felt. It comes from what the emotion is believed to mean. The mind does not simply register sadness, fear, or anger. It turns them into statements about identity. I am sad becomes I am broken. I feel fear becomes I am weak. I feel anger becomes I am a bad person. In this shift, emotion stops being an experience and becomes a definition. This is the difference between emotional weather and emotional identity. Weather passes. Identity feels permanent. When emotions are treated as identity, they stick. When they are treated as weather, they move. The body understands emotions as movement. Sensations rise, peak, and fall. Tightness comes and goes. Heat builds and cools. The nervous system is designed for this flow, but the mind interrupts it by labeling the emotion as personal truth. Once labeled, the emotion is no longer allowed to complete its natural cycle. This interruption is subtle. It happens in milliseconds. A feeling arises, and immediately the mind asks, "What does this say about me?" That question freezes the emotion in place. It becomes something to analyze, justify, or fight. The body remains activated because the signal was never completed. Emotional identity often forms early. When a child feels something and is told, "You are too sensitive, you are angry, you are difficult," the emotion becomes fused with self-image. Over time, the child learns not just to feel emotions, but to be them. This pattern carries into adulthood unnoticed. Later, when an emotion arises, it feels threatening. Not because of its intensity, but because it challenges the identity. If sadness arises in someone who believes they must always be strong, the sadness feels like a collapse. If fear arises in someone who believes they must be confident, the fear feels like failure. So the mind resists, it suppresses, distracts, rationalizes, anything to avoid the emotion becoming part of the story of self. But suppression does not remove emotion, it stores it, and stored emotion leaks out in other ways. This is why emotions often show up unexpectedly. A small comment triggers a big reaction. A quiet moment brings sudden heaviness. The weather was building behind the scenes. It was ignored, not gone. Learning to experience emotions as weather begins with changing the relationship, not the content. You do not need different emotions. You need a different stance toward them. Weather does not need permission to exist. It does not need explanation. It does not ask whether it fits your plans. It arrives, moves, and leaves. When you allow emotions the same freedom, something shifts. Allowing does not mean indulging. Indulging feeds the story. Allowing stays with the sensation. It keeps attention in the body rather than the narrative. This is a crucial distinction. When sadness arises and you stay with the heaviness in the chest instead of the story about why you are sad, the sadness begins to change. Not because you forced it, but because you stopped interrupting it. The mind wants to know why. It believes understanding will bring relief. Sometimes it does, often it does not. The body does not need explanation to release, it needs presence. Presence means staying with sensation without judgment. Not good, not bad, just here. This neutrality is uncomfortable at first because the mind is used to reacting, but neutrality allows the nervous system to process emotion fully. Emotional identity thrives on interpretation. Emotional weather dissolves in observation. The more you observe, the less personal the emotion feels, not because you detach, but because you see clearly. Seeing clearly reveals something surprising. Emotions are not who you are. They are events happening within awareness. Awareness remains unchanged as emotions pass through. This realization is not philosophical, it is experiential. At first, this realization may feel distant. You may understand it intellectually, but still feel overwhelmed emotionally. This is normal. The nervous system needs repetition to learn safety. Each time you stay with an emotion without becoming it, the system learns that feeling is not danger. This learning rewires patterns built over years. It is gentle work. Forcing detachment creates numbness. Allowing creates resilience. Emotional identity also keeps emotions alive through resistance. When you say, "I should not feel this," the emotion tightens. When you say, "This is here right now," the emotion has space to move. Space is what emotions need. They do not need fixing, they need room. Many people fear that if they stop identifying with emotions, they will lose passion or depth. But identity is not depth. Presence is depth. When emotions are allowed to flow, they become richer, not flatter. Joy feels lighter because it is not clung to. Sadness feels cleaner because it is not resisted. Anger feels clearer because it is not suppressed or acted out blindly. This clarity changes behavior naturally. You do not need to control emotions to act wisely. When emotions are felt fully, they inform action without hijacking it. This is especially important with difficult emotions. Fear can signal boundaries. Anger can signal violation. Sadness can signal loss. When emotions are treated as weather, their information remains intact without becoming destructive. Emotional identity, on the other hand, distorts information. Fear becomes avoidance. Anger becomes aggression. Sadness becomes withdrawal. The message is lost in the story. There is also relief in not having to perform emotional consistency. You do not have to always feel the same. You do not have to match yesterday's mood. You do not have to explain today's feeling. Emotions change because conditions change. This is not instability. It is responsiveness. The mind prefers stability of identity because it feels controllable, but emotional life is dynamic. Trying to freeze it creates tension. Letting it move creates balance. This balance allows you to be intimate with life without being consumed by it. You feel deeply without drowning. You care without collapsing. This is emotional maturity. Emotional maturity is not about having fewer emotions. It is about being less entangled in them. When you stop identifying with emotions, you stop fighting them. When you stop fighting them, they stop fighting back. This does not mean emotions disappear. It means they no longer dominate the inner landscape. They come and go like clouds across the sky of awareness. Awareness does not chase the clouds. It does not judge them. It does not try to hold the pleasant ones or push away the dark ones. It remains. As this understanding settles, a quiet confidence emerges. You trust your ability to feel without being overwhelmed. This trust changes everything. You no longer need to avoid situations to protect yourself from feelings. You know you can meet whatever arises. This expands your life. As emotions begin to move freely and no longer define who you are, another layer quietly reveals itself. It is not loud. It does not announce its presence. It hides behind good intentions, intelligence, and even spirituality, yet it fuels resistance more than fear ever could. It is the belief, often unconscious, that you know better than reality. This belief does not feel like pride in the usual sense. It does not walk around boasting or demanding attention. It is subtle, it whispers, it shows up as frustration when life does not unfold according to plan, as impatience with emotions that arise uninvited, as the quiet thought, "This should not be happening to me." At the center of resistance is an unspoken assumption, reality made a mistake, that if things were right, they would align with your expectations, your timing, your preferences. This assumption places the mind above life itself. It says, "My interpretation is more accurate than what exists." This is not logical arrogance. It is existential arrogance. It is the refusal to bow to the fact of the moment. The mind does this to preserve identity. If reality contradicts your expectations, then your understanding feels threatened. Rather than adjusting understanding, the mind rejects reality. This rejection feels like strength, but it is actually fragility. True humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is seeing clearly that life does not revolve around your narrative. When humility is absent, resistance becomes the default response. Resistance says, "This moment is wrong." Acceptance says, "This moment is here." The difference between these two sentences is the difference between suffering and peace. Hidden pride often disguises itself as discernment. You tell yourself you are not resisting, you are just being realistic. But realism does not argue with what exists. It responds to it. There is also moral pride embedded in resistance. You believe you would not feel this way if things were fair, that life should reward effort, goodness, or understanding. When it does not, resentment grows. Resentment is pride in pain. It says, "I deserve better than this," and perhaps you do. But reality does not operate on deserving. It operates on causes and conditions. Buddhist insight does not deny injustice or suffering. It points out something more uncomfortable. Insisting that reality obey your moral framework does not reduce suffering. It adds another layer to it. The ego wants to be right more than it wants to be free. Being right preserves the self-image. Freedom dissolves it. This is why people often cling to grievances long after the situation has ended. Letting go would mean admitting that the resistance was unnecessary, that the pain was partly self-created. The ego would rather carry pain than admit it misjudged. Hidden pride also appears in spiritual language. Thoughts like, "I should be more peaceful by now," or "I understand this teaching, so I should not feel this way." These thoughts elevate the self above the moment. They imply mastery over experience rather than participation in it. But life does not respond to mastery. It responds to openness. The moment you believe you should be beyond a certain feeling, you separate yourself from reality again. The body does not care how enlightened you think you are. It responds to presence, not concepts. Resistance fueled by pride often feels righteous. You believe you are protecting standards, values, or self-respect. But look closely. Is the resistance reducing suffering or reinforcing it? Often resistance tightens the body, sharpens the mind, and narrows perception. These are not signs of wisdom. They are signs of defense. Defense is rooted in fear of being wrong, weak, or insignificant. Pride steps in to cover that fear. It creates distance between you and experience. Distance feels safe, but it is isolating. You stand outside of life, judging it, instead of standing within it, responding to it. This distance also blocks compassion. When you believe you know better than reality, you believe you know better than others. You become impatient with their pace, their choices, their emotions. Even kindness becomes conditional. True compassion arises when you recognize that you are not above the conditions shaping behavior. You are within them. This recognition dissolves superiority and replaces it with understanding. Hidden pride also resists vulnerability. Accepting reality often means admitting confusion, pain, or limitation. Pride avoids this by insisting on control, explanation, or blame. Blame is another form of arrogance. It says, someone should have known better, someone should have prevented this. Sometimes this is true, often it is irrelevant. Blame keeps attention outward. Acceptance brings attention inward. Not to self-judgment, but to awareness. The pride of resistance also shows up as impatience with the present. You want the lesson without the process, the resolution without the discomfort. This impatience rejects the intelligence of unfolding. Life does not rush. It does not skip steps. When you resist the pace of change, you resist reality again. This resistance creates tension in the nervous system because the body is trying to be where the mind refuses to be. The body is here. The mind insists on elsewhere. This split creates stress. The body feels pulled. Over time, this pull becomes chronic. Letting go of hidden pride feels like surrender, but it is actually alignment. You align perception with what is rather than what should be. Alignment does not mean agreement. It means accuracy. Accuracy allows appropriate response. Pride distorts accuracy by filtering reality through expectation. When pride softens, curiosity emerges. Instead of saying, "This should not be happening," you begin to ask, "What is actually happening?" This question opens awareness. Curiosity is the opposite of arrogance. It does not assume knowledge. It listens. Listening to reality does not make you passive. It makes you informed. Another layer of hidden pride is the belief that suffering is personal, that this is happening to me. This belief centers the self as the axis of experience. Acceptance decouples experience from identity. Events happen. Conditions arise. They are not commentary on your worth. When this is seen clearly, resistance weakens. You stop taking life personally, not because you disconnect, but because you see the bigger picture. Seeing the bigger picture does not erase pain, it contextualizes it. Context reduces suffering. The ego resists this because it thrives on centrality. It wants to be the main character. Acceptance decentralizes the ego. Awareness becomes the center instead. This shift feels threatening at first, but it brings relief. You no longer have to carry the weight of interpreting everything through self-reference. Hidden pride also appears as spiritual comparison, thinking others are less aware, that you are further along. This creates separation. Separation creates loneliness. True understanding dissolves hierarchy. You see different expressions of the same human condition. When resistance falls away, humility naturally arises. Not forced humility, natural humility. The kind that recognizes mystery. Mystery does not threaten awareness, it humbles the ego. Accepting mystery allows peace to deepen. You stop needing answers for everything. You stop correcting reality. This does not make you indifferent, it makes you present. Presence reveals intelligence beyond the thinking mind. This intelligence does not argue, it responds. When you stop insisting that reality should be different, energy previously used for resistance becomes available. This energy shows up as clarity, compassion, and grounded action. Pride collapses not through humiliation, but through understanding. You see that resisting what is does not make you strong. It makes you tired. The moment you see this clearly, something softens. The need to be right loosens. The need to control diminishes. As the quiet pride of resistance softens, something deeper begins to speak. Not in words, not in ideas, but in sensations. Before the mind agrees with acceptance, the body reacts to it. And this reaction changes everything. Most people believe peace is a mental achievement. They think if they understand enough, think correctly enough, or repeat the right ideas, calm will follow. But the body does not respond to explanations, it responds to signals. and acceptance is one of the strongest safety signals the body can receive. Long before you had language, your nervous system learned how to survive. It learned to detect danger, tension, threat, and safety. It learned this through sensation, not thought. So when you stop fighting reality, the body feels it first, often before the mind understands what just happened. This is why acceptance can feel relieving even when nothing has been solved. Nothing changed externally. No insight was reached. Yet something inside releases. That release is somatic. It is the body recognizing that the fight has ended. Resistance keeps the nervous system in a state of readiness. Muscles stay tight, breathing stays shallow, attention stays narrowed. The body prepares for impact that never comes. Acceptance signals that there is no immediate threat. The body begins to downshift. This downshift is not weakness, it is regulation. When the body feels safe enough, the mind naturally quiets. Thoughts slow not because you force them to, but because they are no longer needed to manage danger. This is why trying to calm the mind without addressing the body often fails. The mind is responding to bodily tension it did not create. Many people try to think their way into peace while their body is still bracing. This creates frustration. They feel like they understand acceptance, but cannot live it. The missing piece is somatic permission. Somatic permission is the allowance for the body to feel what it is feeling without interference. When you stop telling yourself to relax and simply stop resisting what is already present, the body begins to reorganize on its own. This reorganization happens in small ways. The jaw loosens, the shoulders drop, the belly softens. These changes may seem insignificant, but they signal a major shift. The nervous system is exiting survival mode. Survival mode is efficient for emergencies, not for living. When it stays active too long, it drains energy, dulls emotions, and clouds perception. Acceptance interrupts this pattern. The body does not need to know why you accept. It only needs to feel that you are no longer opposing the moment. This is why acceptance is not a belief. It is an action of non-action. You are not doing something new. You are stopping something old. When the body relaxes, interoception improves. Interoception is the ability to sense internal states. This sensitivity allows you to notice emotions earlier, before they escalate. You become responsive instead of reactive. This responsiveness is felt as space, space between sensation and reaction, space between emotion and story. This space is not created by thinking, it is created by nervous system regulation. Acceptance also changes posture, not metaphorically but literally. When you stop resisting, the spine naturally lengthens, the chest opens. This is not posture correction. It is a biological response to safety. Safety allows expansion. Threat causes contraction. Many people live in chronic contraction without realizing it. They think it is personality or habit. It is neither. It is a nervous system adaptation to ongoing resistance. When acceptance becomes embodied, digestion improves, sleep deepens. The immune system functions more efficiently. These are not spiritual claims. They are physiological outcomes of reduced stress signaling. Stress is not caused by events alone. It is caused by the interpretation of events as threats. Acceptance changes this interpretation at the level of sensation. The vagus nerve plays a key role here. It communicates safety to the body. When acceptance is present, vagal tone improves. This supports calm alertness, emotional flexibility, and social connection. This is why acceptance often brings a sense of warmth or softness. The body is shifting from fight or flight to connection and rest. The mind often resists this shift. It feels unfamiliar. Calm can feel boring or unsafe to a system accustomed to tension. This is why some people feel restless when they first experience somatic peace. Restlessness is not failure, it is withdrawal from adrenaline. Just as the body adjusts when caffeine leaves the system, it adjusts when stress hormones decrease. This adjustment period requires patience. Acceptance supports this transition by allowing sensations to be felt without labeling them as problems. Sensations may include emptiness, heaviness, or vulnerability. These are signs of recalibration, not collapse. The body is learning a new baseline. This learning cannot be rushed. It cannot be commanded. It must be allowed. Intellectual acceptance without somatic acceptance creates dissonance. You say yes mentally, but the body still says no. True acceptance includes the body. This is why simple practices like slowing the breath, softening the gaze, or allowing stillness are powerful. They are not techniques to fix yourself. They are invitations for the body to remember safety. When the body feels safe, emotions become easier to feel. They move without overwhelming. The mind stops bracing against them. This is where peace deepens. Not as an idea, but as a state. Peace is not the absence of sensation. It is the absence of resistance to sensation. The body knows this instinctively. Animals do not resist their internal states. They shake, discharge, rest, and move on. Humans interrupt this process with thought. Acceptance restores the body's natural rhythm. This rhythm includes cycles of activation and rest. Without acceptance, activation never fully resolves. The body remains half awake, half defensive. With acceptance, rest becomes complete. Sleep becomes restorative. Waking becomes clearer. You begin to trust the body again. You stop treating it as something to control or override. You listen. Listening to the body does not make you passive. It makes you attuned. Attunement allows you to notice subtle cues before they become problems. Hunger before irritability, fatigue before burnout, emotion before explosion. This sensitivity is a form of intelligence. The mind often dismisses bodily intelligence because it is not verbal, but it is ancient and precise. Acceptance strengthens this intelligence by removing interference. Interference comes from judgment. Judgment tightens. Tightness disrupts signal. When judgment drops, signals become clear. Clear signals guide wise action. This is why acceptance is not about enduring life. It is about cooperating with it. Cooperation reduces friction. Friction creates heat. Heat creates fatigue. The body relaxes when it is no longer fighting the present. This relaxation does not mean collapse. It means readiness without tension. Athletes understand this. The best performance comes from relaxed alertness, not strain. Life works the same way. When acceptance becomes embodied, the mind naturally changes. Thoughts become less urgent. Stories lose intensity. You do not need to argue with them. They pass. The body teaches the mind that safety does not require control. Over time, this learning becomes stable. You carry calm into situations that once triggered you, not because you hardened, but because you softened. Softness is often mistaken for weakness, but in the body, softness allows movement. Rigidity breaks. This is why acceptance is resilient. It bends without snapping. As the body continues to learn safety, another fear may arise, a fear of losing the story you tell about yourself, a fear that without struggle you will disappear. This fear is not mental, it is somatic. It is felt as emptiness or uncertainty in the chest or belly. Meeting this fear requires the same approach, allowing, staying, not filling the space with meaning too quickly, because that space is not absence, it is openness. And openness is where the next transformation begins. As the body learns to soften and the nervous system begins to trust stillness, a new kind of fear often surfaces. It is not sharp. It does not rush the heart. It feels quiet, hollow, and unsettling. It is the fear that without struggle, without tension, without the familiar inner commentary, something essential will be lost. This fear does not come from the mind alone, it comes from identity. Most people do not realize how much of their sense of self is built from stories. Stories about who they are, what they have endured, what they are becoming, and what must still be fixed. These stories create continuity. They explain the past and justify the future. They give meaning to effort and suffering, and they provide a sense of existence. Non-acceptance protects these stories. When reality challenges the narrative, resistance rises automatically. Not because the narrative is true, but because without it, the self feels unstable. The self-narrative is not a lie. It is a construction. It formed slowly, shaped by memory, emotion, and interpretation. It helped organize experience. It gave coherence to life. But over time, it hardened. It became something to defend. Acceptance threatens this defense. When you fully accept what is, the story pauses. There is no commentary, no justification, no direction, just presence. And presence has no storyline. For the ego, this feels like erasure. The ego does not fear pain as much as it fears disappearance. Pain confirms existence. Struggle confirms effort. Identity feeds on contrast. Without resistance, the familiar edges blur. This is why people often feel uneasy in moments of deep peace. The mind looks around and asks, where am I in this? What role do I play? What should I be doing? When there is no answer, anxiety creeps in. The fear beneath non-acceptance is the fear of becoming no one. But what is actually threatened is not awareness. It is the narrative identity. And narrative identity feels essential because it has been mistaken for self. From early life, you learn to describe yourself. I am this kind of person. I am someone who struggles. I am someone who overcomes. I am someone who feels deeply. These descriptions helped you relate to others. They helped others relate to you. They became social currency. Over time, these descriptions became internalized. You stopped seeing them as descriptions and started experiencing them as truth. When something happens that does not fit the story, discomfort arises. Acceptance asks you to let the moment be without fitting it into a story. This feels like standing without a name. Standing without a name feels vulnerable. It feels exposed. The mind rushes to label the experience, to anchor it to identity. If it cannot, it resists. This resistance is not conscious. It is automatic. It shows up as overthinking, judgment, distraction, or emotional tightening. Anything to restore narrative control. The body feels this as restlessness. The chest feels empty. The stomach feels uncertain. These sensations are interpreted as danger, but they are actually signs of spaciousness. Spaciousness is unfamiliar. The nervous system has learned to associate familiarity with safety. The story is familiar. Silence is not. The story says, this is who you are. Silence says nothing. But silence does not erase you. It reveals something deeper. When narrative identity loosens, awareness remains. You are still here. Breathing continues. Sensation continues. Presence continues. The fear comes from the belief that you are the story rather than the awareness in which the story appears. Acceptance exposes this belief. This exposure feels like loss because the mind has invested heavily in the narrative. It has used it to navigate relationships, choices, and values. Letting it loosen feels like stepping into a void. But the void is not empty. It is unstructured. Unstructured experience feels chaotic to the mind, but it is natural to awareness. Awareness does not need structure to exist. It only needs presence. Many people resist acceptance because they fear becoming passive or directionless. They believe the story provides motivation. Without it, they worry they will drift. This belief overlooks something important. Motivation does not come from narrative alone. It also comes from attunement. When you are present, needs and values arise organically. The story often overrides this organic guidance. It tells you what you should want, what you should feel, what you should pursue. Acceptance quiets the story so deeper signals can be felt. These signals are subtle. They do not shout. They do not justify themselves. They require listening. Listening without interpretation feels risky to the ego. The ego wants certainty. It wants to know where this is going. Acceptance offers no guarantees. It offers presence. Presence feels like groundlessness at first. There is no plan to hold on to, no identity to lean on. This is why non-acceptance persists, even when it hurts. Pain with identity feels safer than peace without it. The fear of losing the narrative is also the fear of losing control over meaning. The story explains why things happen. Without it, events are just events. This neutrality feels unsettling. Meaning gives comfort. It makes suffering feel purposeful. Acceptance does not remove meaning, but it stops forcing it prematurely. Forcing meaning is another form of resistance. It fills space that could otherwise allow understanding to emerge naturally. When acceptance is present, meaning arises slowly, if at all, and sometimes no meaning is needed. Life simply unfolds. This simplicity is deeply threatening to a mind trained to analyze and interpret. The self-narrative also carries unresolved emotional energy. Pain that has not been felt fully becomes part of the story. Letting go of the story means letting the pain surface without explanation. This feels dangerous. The mind prefers to keep pain packaged in narrative form rather than feeling it directly. Acceptance opens the package. This opening requires courage, not dramatic courage, but quiet willingness. Willingness to feel without knowing who you are in the feeling. When you allow this, something unexpected happens. The fear does not grow, it softens. The emptiness fills with presence. The body relaxes into the unknown. You discover that you do not disappear without the story. You become more available. Available to sensation. Available to connection. Available to life. The self-narrative often isolates. It separates you from others by reinforcing difference. Acceptance dissolves some of these boundaries. You feel more human, less defined. This can feel disorienting. It can also feel relieving. Relief comes from no longer having to perform an identity. You do not need to be consistent. You do not need to be coherent. You can respond to what is here now. This responsiveness feels alive. It does not rely on memory. It does not project into the future. It moves with conditions. The ego resists this because it cannot predict it, but awareness thrives in it. As acceptance deepens, the story does not vanish completely. It becomes lighter. It is used when needed and set down when not. It stops being the center. The fear of losing the narrative gradually transforms into curiosity. Who am I without this story? What remains? What remains is presence, quiet, stable, unmoved by content. This presence was always here, beneath the narrative. It was obscured by identification, not absent. Seeing this is not an intellectual conclusion. It is a lived shift. It happens in moments when you stop referencing the story and simply are. These moments may be brief at first. That is enough. Each time you rest in presence without narrative, the fear loses credibility. The nervous system learns that identity is not required for safety. This learning changes how you relate to experience. You no longer need to defend who you are. You can meet what is without armor. This does not erase personality or values. It frees them from rigidity. Freedom feels spacious. Spaciousness feels unfamiliar, but familiarity grows with exposure. As the grip of the self-story loosens, another habit quietly comes into view. A habit that once looked like discipline, responsibility, even virtue. The habit of needing life to be clean, resolved, and perfectly arranged before you can relax. When that habit weakens, something unexpected appears underneath it. Life is messy, and it always has been. Perfectionism is not the love of excellence. It is the fear of disorder. It is the belief that peace will arrive once everything is fixed, understood, and placed in the right order. This belief feels reasonable. It promises safety, but it quietly turns life into a problem that is never solved. The need for things to be neat is deeply connected to identity. When the inner story loosens, perfectionism often rushes in as a replacement structure. If I can just organize my thoughts, heal my wounds, improve my habits, then I will finally be okay. This promise keeps the mind busy and the nervous system tense. Buddhist wisdom points in the opposite direction. It does not say clarity comes from control. It says clarity comes from seeing what is, even when what is looks unfinished, contradictory, or uncomfortable. Life does not unfold in straight lines. It moves in loops, reversals, and pauses. Perfectionism resists this movement. It wants progress to be visible and permanent. It wants healing to be linear. When life does not cooperate, frustration arises. That frustration is not caused by disorder. It is caused by the refusal to allow disorder. Disorder feels threatening because it cannot be predicted. The mind does not know how to orient itself when there is no clear path. So it creates rules, standards, expectations. These give a sense of direction, but they also create rigidity. Rigidity breaks under pressure. Life applies pressure constantly. Perfectionism also disguises itself as self-improvement. You tell yourself you are just trying to be better. But look closely. Is the effort fueled by curiosity, or by dissatisfaction, by openness, or by rejection of who you are now? When improvement is driven by rejection, it never ends. There is always another flaw to fix, another layer to clean up. Peace remains conditional. Conditional peace is fragile. It depends on outcomes. Unconditional peace depends on relationship. Your relationship to messiness determines your freedom. Messiness does not mean chaos for its own sake. It means allowing life to unfold without forcing it into an ideal shape. It means letting emotions overlap, plans change, answers remain incomplete. The mind associates messiness with failure, but many of the most meaningful moments in life are messy. Grief is messy, love is messy, growth is messy. Trying to sanitize them removes their depth. Perfectionism flattens experience. It trades aliveness for control. When you allow life to be messy, clarity begins to appear in a different way, not as certainty, but as understanding. You see patterns instead of forcing conclusions. You notice what works and what does not without judgment. Judgment interferes with perception. When you judge disorder as wrong, you stop observing it. You rush to fix it. In doing so, you miss what it is teaching. Disorder often reveals what control was hiding. Emotions surface. Needs become clear. Limits are exposed. This information is essential for wisdom. Buddhist practice emphasizes direct observation over correction. Sit with what is, watch it arise and pass. This practice trains the mind to tolerate ambiguity. Ambiguity is not confusion. It is openness to multiple truths existing at once. Perfectionism demands resolution. Acceptance allows coexistence. You can feel unsure and still act wisely. You can feel incomplete and still be whole. Perfectionism also creates delay. I will rest when this is finished. I will be happy when I improve. I will accept myself when I change. Life becomes a waiting room. Letting life be messy ends the waiting. You meet life as it is now. This meeting is intimate. It removes the distance created by constant evaluation. Evaluation says, this moment is not enough. Acceptance says, this moment is here. From acceptance, response becomes natural. You adjust without self-attack. You clean what needs cleaning without believing everything must be spotless. There is a difference between care and compulsion. Care arises from presence. Compulsion arises from fear. Perfectionism is fear dressed as responsibility, fear of being judged, fear of being unworthy, fear of losing control. When you allow messiness, you face these fears directly. They lose some of their power when they are not hidden behind productivity. Messiness also humanizes you. It softens comparison. You stop measuring yourself against imagined ideals. You see that everyone is navigating uncertainty. This recognition builds compassion for yourself and others. Compassion does not arise from perfection. It arises from shared vulnerability. The mind often resists this vulnerability. It prefers the safety of standards, but standards do not love you back. Presence does. Clarity that comes from disorder is not loud. It is subtle. It emerges slowly as you stop interfering. For example, when you stop trying to fix an emotion, you may notice what it actually needs. Not suppression, not explanation, perhaps rest, perhaps expression, perhaps time. When you stop forcing decisions, priorities reorganize themselves. What truly matters rises naturally. This natural ordering is more intelligent than imposed order. It aligns with reality rather than fighting it. Buddhist teachings emphasize impermanence. Everything is in motion. Perfectionism denies this. It wants to freeze moments into finished states. But finished states do not last. Clinging to them creates suffering. Allowing messiness means accepting impermanence emotionally, not just intellectually. You stop expecting stability where none exists. This acceptance reduces anxiety. Anxiety comes from trying to secure the future. Messiness accepts that the future is not fully knowable. When you stop demanding certainty, the nervous system relaxes. It no longer has to prepare for every possible outcome. Relaxation does not mean carelessness. It means trust. Trust that you can meet what arises. Trust that clarity will emerge when needed. This trust grows through experience. Each time you allow disorder without collapsing, confidence builds. Confidence not in outcomes, but in presence. Letting life be messy also means allowing yourself to be inconsistent. You do not have to always respond the same way. You are allowed to learn. Learning requires mistakes. Mistakes require tolerance of imperfection. Perfectionism punishes mistakes. Acceptance integrates them. Integrated experience becomes wisdom. Wisdom is not clean. It is layered. It holds contradictions. You can be both strong and unsure, both peaceful and grieving, both clear and confused. Trying to resolve these contradictions too quickly creates inner conflict. Allowing them to coexist creates depth. Depth is where meaning lives. The Buddhist path does not aim for a flawless self. It points to freedom from the need to be flawless. Freedom feels light. It allows laughter at your own messiness. Laughter releases tension. Tension fuels perfectionism. When tension releases, you act more skillfully, not less. Skillfulness is flexible. It adapts. It listens. Perfectionism is rigid. It insists. Insistence exhausts the body. Flexibility restores it. As you allow life to be messy, you may notice resistance arise again. The urge to clean things up quickly, to make sense of everything. Notice it gently. This urge is old. It learned to protect you. Thank it. Then let it rest. Clarity will still come, often when you stop looking for it. As life is allowed to remain unfinished and imperfect, something deeper begins to reveal itself. You start to notice patterns, the same emotions returning, the same conflicts replaying, the same pain wearing different faces. This repetition is not bad luck. It is not fate punishing you. It is something far more intimate. It is the echo of inner war. In Buddhist understanding, karma is not a system of reward and punishment. It is momentum. It is cause and effect unfolding through intention, reaction, and habit. What you resist does not disappear. It reshapes itself and returns. Inner war creates karma long before action ever happens. The moment you say no to what is, tension is born. That tension does not stay contained in the moment. It imprints the nervous system. It shapes perception. It influences future reactions. When you fight reality, the body learns to expect battle. The mind learns to anticipate threat. Even when conditions change, the system responds as if the old danger is still present. This is how suffering repeats. Resistance teaches the nervous system that the world is unsafe. Once learned, this belief colors everything. Neutral events feel threatening. Ambiguous situations feel dangerous. You react before understanding. This reaction becomes habit. Habit becomes character. Character shapes destiny. The karma of inner war is subtle because it feels justified. You believe you are protecting yourself. You believe you are correcting what is wrong. But each act of resistance reinforces the belief that life is an enemy. An enemy must be watched, controlled, defeated. This stance creates exhaustion and vigilance. Over time, vigilance becomes identity. You begin to meet life with clenched muscles and narrowed attention. You expect disappointment. You brace for impact. Even joy feels temporary because the system is waiting for the next threat. This waiting is suffering. Inner war also shapes how you relate to others. When you fight your own experience, you fight theirs. You correct emotions. You resist differences. You see people as problems to manage rather than beings to meet. These interactions create feedback loops. Others respond defensively. Conflict escalates. You conclude that the world is difficult. The belief is reinforced. Karma is not destiny. It is pattern. And patterns can be seen. When you notice repeated suffering, look beneath the surface. Ask not what is wrong with life, but where resistance is still active. Often the pain is not new. It is familiar energy moving through a new form. The mind wants to solve this intellectually. It wants explanations. But karma is not resolved by understanding alone. It is resolved by changing relationship. Each moment of non-resistance interrupts momentum. Each moment of acceptance plants a different seed. Seeds do not sprout immediately. This is why acceptance can feel unrewarding at first. You do not see instant results. But beneath the surface, patterns are shifting. When you respond instead of react, the nervous system learns something new. It learns that safety does not require defense. This learning alters future responses. Over time, situations that once triggered you lose their charge. Not because they changed, but because the inner war ended. Inner war also distorts memory. Painful experiences are replayed with resistance, reinforcing the emotional imprint. Acceptance allows memory to settle without reactivation. When memories settle, they stop shaping present perception. You stop expecting the past to repeat. This expectation is a major source of suffering. You anticipate pain before it arrives. Often, it never does, but the body suffers anyway. Karma is created as much by anticipation as by action. Resistance also shapes choice. When you fight reality, you choose from fear. Fear narrows options. You repeat familiar patterns because they feel safer than the unknown. These choices create similar outcomes. You conclude that nothing changes. But what remains unchanged is the stance toward experience. Acceptance opens choice. It expands perception. New responses become possible. This is why Buddhist teachings emphasize right view. Right view is not belief. It is clear seeing without distortion. Resistance distorts. When view is distorted, action follows suit. Even well-intended actions create harm. Inner war also drains energy. When energy is low, resilience weakens. You become more reactive. The cycle tightens. Breaking the cycle requires rest from battle. Acceptance is that rest. Rest does not mean inaction. It means ceasing unnecessary struggle. When struggle ends, energy returns. With energy comes patience. With patience comes wisdom. Wisdom recognizes that not every discomfort is a problem. Not every challenge is an attack. Some are simply conditions passing through. Seeing this clearly reduces suffering immediately. The karma of inner war also explains why spiritual bypassing fails. When you suppress discomfort in the name of positivity, resistance remains. The body remembers. Suppressed resistance resurfaces later, often stronger. Acceptance allows discomfort to move through fully. This completes the cycle. No residue remains to shape the future. Completing cycles is essential. Incomplete experiences linger. They seek resolution through repetition. Repetition is not punishment, it is an invitation to awareness. Each repeated pattern is an opportunity to respond differently. When you respond differently, karma changes direction. This change is not dramatic, it is quiet, subtle, but profound. You may notice fewer emotional spikes, shorter recovery times, more space between trigger and response. These are signs that inner war is dissolving. As inner war dissolves, the future feels less heavy. You stop projecting old pain forward. The mind becomes more present. The body becomes more relaxed. Life still brings challenges. Acceptance does not eliminate difficulty. It eliminates unnecessary suffering. This distinction is crucial. Suffering multiplies when pain meets resistance. Pain transforms when it meets awareness. The seeds you plant now shape future experience. Each moment of acceptance plants a seed of ease. Each moment of resistance plants a seed of struggle. This is not moral judgment, it is mechanics. Understanding this brings responsibility without blame. You see your role without condemning yourself. Condemnation is another form of inner war. Gentle awareness is enough. As awareness deepens, you may notice something surprising. Some conflicts resolve without effort. Some emotions fade without explanation. This is the power of non-resistance. When you stop feeding inner war, it starves. And in the space it leaves behind, something else begins to grow. Trust. Trust in change, trust in impermanence. This trust opens the next door. As the inner war quiets and its momentum begins to fade, something fragile but powerful starts to appear. A willingness not to control the future, not to secure outcomes, but to trust movement itself. This is where acceptance stops being a coping tool and becomes something far more radical. Trust is not passive. It is not blind hope. It is the courage to stay present while everything changes. At the heart of resistance is the refusal to accept impermanence. The mind wants things to stay. It wants relief to last, love to remain unchanged, clarity to be permanent. Even when suffering ends, the mind immediately reaches to hold on to the ending. This reaching is subtle, but it recreates tension. Impermanence is not just about loss, it is about movement. Everything that arises is already in the process of changing. This includes pain, fear, joy, and peace. Acceptance means trusting this movement instead of trying to freeze it. Most people think they resist pain. In reality, they resist change. Pain is uncomfortable, but change is threatening. Change dissolves certainty, it dissolves identity, it dissolves control. Acceptance asks you to let go of the illusion that anything can be held forever. This includes the things you love most. This is why acceptance feels radical. It goes against the deepest instinct to cling. Clinging feels like safety, but clinging creates fear. Fear of loss, fear of ending, fear of change. The more tightly you hold, the more anxious you become about what might slip away. Trusting impermanence reverses this pattern. When you stop demanding permanence, fear loosens. You stop asking life to guarantee itself. This trust does not come from belief. It comes from seeing impermanence clearly. You have already lived through countless changes, emotions passed, situations shifted, even identities transformed. You survived every ending so far. The mind forgets this. It treats each change as if it were the first. Acceptance reminds the system of something it already knows. Impermanence is not chaos. It has rhythm. Day follows night. Breath follows breath. Seasons turn. The body ages. Thoughts arise and fade. When you align with this rhythm, resistance weakens. Acceptance is radical because it removes bargaining. You stop saying, "I will accept this if it stays pleasant." You accept even when it does not. This does not mean you stop enjoying happiness. It means you stop trying to own it. Owning happiness is one of the most subtle forms of clinging. When joy appears, the mind immediately says, "I hope this lasts." That hope carries fear inside it, fear of its end. Fear of the end steals presence from the moment itself. You are no longer fully here. You are guarding the future. Trusting impermanence allows you to enjoy happiness without anxiety. You let it come fully. You let it leave fully. There is gratitude without grasping. This is freedom. The Buddha taught that suffering arises not from change, but from craving permanence in a changing world. Acceptance is the antidote because it aligns you with reality instead of against it. Trusting impermanence also softens grief. Loss still hurts. Acceptance does not numb pain. It changes the relationship to it. Grief becomes an expression of love rather than a protest against reality. When you resist loss, grief becomes bitterness. When you accept impermanence, grief becomes honoring. This shift allows grief to move. It does not get stuck. Trusting change also frees you from self-attachment. You stop trying to preserve a fixed version of yourself. You allow growth to happen without fear of losing who you were. Identity becomes fluid. You adapt without panic. You learn without self-betrayal. This fluidity is resilience. Resilience does not come from rigidity. It comes from adaptability. Acceptance trains adaptability by teaching you to stay present while things shift. The nervous system relaxes when it no longer expects stability where none exists. It stops bracing for disruption. Disruption becomes part of the flow. This does not make life predictable. It makes you capable. Trusting impermanence also reduces regret. When you accept that the past could not have unfolded differently, you stop rewriting it mentally. You let the lessons remain without reliving the pain. This acceptance is not indifference. It is maturity. Maturity recognizes that clinging to the past does not protect the future. It only anchors suffering. Trusting impermanence also changes how you relate to desire. Desire no longer feels like lack. It becomes movement, energy, curiosity. When desire is not forced into permanence, it becomes lighter. You pursue without desperation. You enjoy without anxiety. This reduces attachment even to positive experiences. You stop needing them to validate your life. Validation is another form of clinging. Acceptance frees you from needing proof that life is good or meaningful. Meaning arises naturally when you are present. Impermanence also humbles the ego. The ego wants to build something lasting, a legacy, a fixed self. Acceptance reminds you that everything is temporary. This reminder can feel unsettling. It can also feel liberating. You stop carrying the burden of permanence. You are allowed to be unfinished. Trusting impermanence also brings ethical clarity. When you know everything changes, you act with care. You do not postpone kindness. You do not waste moments waiting for the perfect time. Urgency becomes gentler. You do what matters now. Acceptance does not make you passive. It makes you responsive to the moment as it is, not as you wish it to be. Trusting impermanence also dissolves envy. When you see that everyone's circumstances are shifting, comparison loses meaning. What someone has now will change. What you lack now will change. This perspective reduces resentment. It increases compassion. Compassion arises naturally when you see that everyone is navigating change. Impermanence also softens fear of death. Death is the ultimate change. Acceptance does not remove fear entirely, but it places it within a larger context of transformation. Life is change. Death is change. The fear comes from wanting to freeze what cannot be frozen. Trusting impermanence allows you to live more fully now. You stop postponing life. This trust is radical because it asks you to step into uncertainty willingly, to let go of guarantees, to rest without knowing. Rest without knowing feels unsafe at first, but with time, it becomes familiar. The nervous system learns that safety does not depend on certainty. This learning changes everything. You become less reactive, less controlling, less attached, more present. Presence becomes home. Home is not a place that stays the same. It is a way of being that adapts. Acceptance as trust in impermanence is not a single decision. It is a practice, a daily willingness to meet change without armor. Some days this feels easy. Some days it feels impossible. Both are impermanent too. Acceptance includes your inability to accept sometimes. This gentleness is essential. As trust deepens, you notice that peace no longer feels fragile. It does not need protection. It comes and goes, like everything else, and because you no longer cling to it, it leaves less suffering when it goes. As trust in impermanence settles, another paradox appears. You stop clinging, you stop forcing, you stop trying to secure outcomes. And instead of feeling victorious, something in you feels uneasy, almost disappointed, as if you gave up too soon, as if peace arrived wearing the wrong costume. This reaction confuses many people. They taste calm, but it does not feel like success. It feels quiet, ordinary, undramatic. The ego looks at this softness and calls it failure. Peace often feels wrong at first because it does not feed the identity that was built through struggle. The ego was shaped in effort. It learned to measure worth through tension, striving, and endurance. It believes that progress should feel like effort and victory should feel like intensity. When peace arrives without fireworks, the ego feels bypassed. Surrender does not announce itself with applause. It does not validate the story of how hard you tried. It simply ends the fight. And for the ego, ending the fight feels like losing. The ego understands life as a series of battles, problems to solve, obstacles to overcome, enemies to defeat. When resistance ends, the ego loses its role. No role feels like no value. This is why peace can feel empty at first, not because it lacks depth, but because the identity that thrived on struggle no longer knows how to exist. The ego says, if I am not fighting, I must be failing. If I am not improving, I must be stagnating. If I am not striving, I must be giving up. These thoughts are not truth. They are withdrawal symptoms from effort-based identity. Effort-based identity believes that tension equals meaning. When tension drops, meaning seems to vanish. The mind panics and tries to recreate struggle to feel alive again. This is why people sometimes sabotage calm. They pick fights, they overthink, they create problems, not consciously but out of habit. Peace feels unfamiliar because it is not dramatic. It does not stimulate adrenaline. It does not create urgency. It does not promise future reward. It is simply here. The ego finds this threatening because it cannot take credit for presence. Presence does not belong to anyone. Surrender is misunderstood because it sounds like collapse, but collapse is forced. Surrender is voluntary. Collapse is helplessness. Surrender is clarity. When you surrender, you stop trying to control what cannot be controlled. You stop insisting on outcomes. You stop negotiating with reality. This frees energy that was trapped in resistance. But the ego does not feel freed. It feels dismissed. The ego equates control with responsibility. Letting go of control feels irresponsible to it. It believes something terrible will happen if it is not in charge. Yet when surrender is genuine, nothing falls apart. In fact, things often become simpler, decisions feel clearer, actions feel more precise. Life flows with less friction. This contradicts the ego's beliefs. So the ego interprets the ease as suspicious, too easy, too quiet, too soft. The ego expects peace to feel like achievement, but achievement belongs to time and comparison. Peace belongs to presence. Presence has no scoreboard. This is why surrender can feel like doing nothing, even when much is happening. You are no longer pushing against experience. You are moving with it. Movement without force feels like weakness to a mind trained in force. The ego also fears surrender because it mistakes it for defeat. Defeat implies loss to an opponent, but in surrender, there is no opponent, only reality. You are not losing to life. You are stopping the fight with it. Stopping the fight does not mean you stop acting. It means you stop acting from resistance. Action from resistance is tense, urgent, and reactive. Action from surrender is calm, responsive, and grounded. The ego thrives on urgency. Urgency creates importance. Surrender dissolves urgency. Importance fades. This can feel like insignificance. Insignificance terrifies the ego because it equates being special with being valuable. Awareness does not need to be special. It simply is. When surrender deepens, the ego may produce thoughts like, I should be doing more, I am falling behind, this can't be right. These thoughts are attempts to regain control. Do not fight them. Fighting them recreates the battle. Notice them as symptoms of transition. The body is learning a new way of being. The mind lags behind. Surrender often feels like giving up on an imagined future. The future where everything finally makes sense. The future where you are finally enough. Letting go of that future feels like loss. But that future was a carrot. It kept you running. Peace arrives when you stop chasing it. This stopping feels like failure only because success was defined incorrectly. Success was defined as becoming someone else. Peace is about being where you are. The ego believes that becoming equals progress. Awareness recognizes that being is already complete. This does not mean growth stops. Growth continues naturally, but it is no longer driven by self-rejection. Self-rejection fuels striving. Surrender removes self-rejection. The ego interprets this as complacency, but complacency is numb. Surrender is alive. You feel more, not less, but without drama. This lack of drama can feel disappointing. The ego expected transformation to feel grand. Instead, it feels ordinary. Ordinary is threatening because it does not elevate the ego. Yet ordinary is where life actually happens. Surrender also exposes how much effort was unnecessary. This realization can sting. The ego resists admitting wasted energy. It would rather believe the struggle was required. Peace reveals that much of the struggle was optional. This realization can trigger shame or regret. Acceptance includes these feelings too. Shame says, I failed by struggling. Pride says, I succeeded by enduring. Both are ego strategies. Awareness says, this happened. Now it is seen. Seeing ends repetition. Liberation does not feel like winning. It feels like relief. Relief is quiet. It does not inflate. It settles. Settling feels like slowing down. Slowing down feels like falling behind in a world addicted to speed. The ego measures worth through motion. Surrender measures worth through presence. Presence does not compete. This is why peace can feel lonely at first. You are no longer running with the crowd. You are standing still. Standing still reveals what movement hid. It reveals the simplicity of being alive, breathing, feeling, existing without justification. This simplicity can feel underwhelming. The ego wants more. More is never enough. Surrender accepts enough. Enough does not mean settling for less. It means recognizing fullness. Fullness does not shout, it rests. As surrender stabilizes, the ego slowly relaxes. It learns that nothing bad happens when it steps back. In fact, life becomes easier. This learning takes time. The ego has spent years believing it was necessary. Patience is required. Not with life, but with the mind. Each time peace feels like failure, notice who is judging. It is not awareness. Awareness does not judge peace. Awareness rests in it. The sense of failure fades as the system adjusts. Peace becomes familiar. The ego finds new roles that do not require struggle. Creativity emerges. Compassion deepens. Clarity sharpens. None of this needs effort. Peace stops feeling like defeat and starts feeling like home. Not a perfect home, a lived-in one. As peace slowly stops feeling like failure and begins to feel like home, another habit of the mind comes into focus. a habit so common it is rarely questioned. The need for answers, the need for resolution, the need for everything to make sense before you can finally rest. Most people believe closure is necessary for peace. They believe that once they understand why something happened, once the story is complete, once the loose ends are tied, then they will be free. Until then, they wait, they replay, they search, they hold tension in the body without realizing it. This waiting quietly drains life. The need for closure is not about truth. It is about control. It is the mind trying to stabilize itself by finishing the story. When something remains unresolved, the mind feels exposed. It does not know where to place the experience, so it keeps returning to it. Unresolved experiences feel heavy not because they are incomplete, but because they are resisted. The resistance says, this should have ended differently. There should be an explanation. There should be justice. There should be clarity. But life does not always provide these things, and when the mind insists on them, suffering continues. Acceptance changes this relationship completely. When you accept an experience fully, even without understanding it, the nervous system relaxes. The body stops bracing for an answer that may never come. This is the quiet freedom of not needing closure. Closure is often confused with healing, but healing does not require resolution. It requires allowance. When an experience is allowed to exist as it is, without demand, its emotional charge begins to dissolve. The mind wants to explain pain because explanation feels like mastery. If I understand it, I can contain it. But containment is not the same as release. Release happens when the body no longer needs to protect against the memory. Memories are not stored as stories alone. They are stored as sensations: tightness, heat, constriction. These sensations persist when the experience was not allowed to complete itself emotionally. Completion does not mean conclusion, it means full contact. When something painful happened, perhaps you were not able to feel it fully at the time. You survived by suppressing, distracting, or moving on too quickly. This was intelligent. It protected you then. But later, the body asks for completion. The mind responds by searching for closure through thought. This does not work because the body does not process through explanation. It processes through presence. Acceptance allows the body to feel what was once too much, slowly, safely, without forcing. When you stop needing closure, you stop interrogating the past. You stop asking it to justify itself. You allow it to be what it was. This allowance is not approval, it is recognition. Recognition says, this happened, it affected me, and it does not need to make sense for me to be at peace now. This realization is deeply liberating. Many people stay trapped in old pain because they believe they cannot move forward without answers. But answers often come too late, or not at all. Waiting for them ties your peace to conditions you cannot control. Not needing closure returns peace to the present. The mind fears this because it equates unresolved with unsafe. But unresolved does not mean ongoing. It means incomplete narrative, not incomplete experience. When you accept that some experiences will never fit neatly into a story, the story loses its grip. The emotional energy bound to the need for resolution begins to unwind. This unwinding feels like softening. The chest loosens, the breath deepens. The body stops replaying the moment. You may notice that memories arise with less intensity. They no longer hijack the present. They feel distant, neutral, informational. This does not mean you forget. It means you are no longer reliving. Reliving is caused by resistance. Acceptance allows memory to remain in the past. The need for closure also affects relationships. Many people carry unfinished conversations in their minds for years. Words they wish they had said. Apologies they never received. Endings that never came. These unfinished loops consume energy. Acceptance does not rewrite these conversations. It releases the demand that they be completed. You realize that peace does not require the other person to understand, apologize, or change. Peace requires you to stop waiting. Waiting keeps the wound open. Letting go does not mean what happened was okay. It means you are no longer organizing your inner life around it. This is not indifference, it is self-respect. The mind often resists this because it fears injustice. If I let go, it means they got away with it. But holding on does not correct injustice, it only extends suffering. Justice and peace are not the same process. One can be pursued externally. The other is cultivated internally. Acceptance allows you to separate these. You can still set boundaries, you can still speak truth, you can still act, but you no longer need emotional resolution from the past to be whole now. This separation is crucial. The need for closure also shows up in spiritual seeking. People want final answers, ultimate understanding, a moment where everything clicks and stays clicked. But awakening is not a conclusion, it is an ongoing openness. Trying to finalize understanding creates rigidity. Acceptance keeps understanding fluid. When you stop needing closure, curiosity replaces compulsion. You no longer interrogate experience, you observe it. Observation is gentle, compulsion is forceful. The nervous system responds differently to each. Compulsion tightens, observation relaxes. This is why acceptance feels calming even when questions remain unanswered. Unanswered questions are not a threat to awareness, they are only a threat to the ego. The ego wants certainty to feel important. Awareness is comfortable with mystery. Mystery does not destabilize awareness, it enriches it. When you accept mystery, you stop filling silence with thought. Silence becomes spacious rather than uncomfortable. In that space, unresolved experiences lose their urgency. They no longer demand attention. They are allowed to fade naturally. Fading does not mean erasing, it means releasing emotional charge. You can remember without reacting. You can recall without reliving. This is freedom. Freedom is not about fixing the past. It is about no longer living inside it. Acceptance brings you fully into now. Now does not need closure. It needs presence. Presence meets life as it is, not as it should have been. The body recognizes this immediately. It stops bracing for explanation. It stops scanning memory for danger. Rest becomes possible. Rest is the signal that the system no longer expects something to resolve. This rest is not sleep, it is inner settling. Inner settling allows energy to return. When energy returns, life expands. You become available for new experiences without old filters. This does not mean old pain never surfaces. It means when it does not take over. You meet it like weather passing through, not like a problem to solve. This approach does not require effort. It requires permission. Permission for things to remain unfinished. Life itself is unfinished. Every moment leads to another. No experience is truly complete. Even joy ends. Even clarity shifts. Trying to complete life creates suffering. Allowing incompletion creates peace. This does not make life meaningless, it makes it alive. Meaning does not come from resolution, it comes from presence. When you stop demanding closure, you stop resisting impermanence in a new way. You allow life to move without final conclusions. This openness brings lightness. Lightness allows laughter, breath, ease. Ease does not mean life becomes easy. It means you stop adding weight. As this understanding deepens, you may notice something else. The mind spends less time in the past, less time rehearsing the future. Time itself begins to feel different. You are no longer traveling mentally as much. You are here. And this presence reveals another freedom waiting to be explored. As the need for closure loosens, something else quietly falls away with it. The constant movement of the mind through time. The habit of leaving the present again and again, not with the body, but with thought. When unresolved experiences lose their grip, you may notice something unfamiliar. You are here more often, and that changes everything. Most suffering does not happen now. It happens in remembered moments and imagined futures. The body may be sitting safely in a room, but the mind is somewhere else, replaying old scenes or rehearsing what might go wrong next. This movement feels automatic, so normal that it goes unnoticed, but it is one of the main ways suffering renews itself. Emotional time travel is the habit of mentally leaving the present to manage pain. The mind believes that if it replays the past enough times, it will finally understand it. If it rehearses the future enough times, it will finally be prepared. These intentions seem protective. In reality, they keep the nervous system locked in stress. The past no longer exists, but the body does not know this when the mind revisits it with emotion. Each replay activates the same physiological response as the original event. Heart rate changes, muscles tighten, breathing shifts. The body relives what the mind remembers. The future does not exist either, but the body reacts to imagined threats as if they are real. Anxiety is not fear of what is happening. It is fear of what might happen. Emotional time travel keeps the body in a state of constant anticipation. Acceptance interrupts this cycle at its root. When you accept the present moment fully, there is nowhere else to go. The mind loses its reason to travel. It no longer needs to fix the past or secure the future because it stops arguing with now. This does not mean memories disappear or planning ends. It means they lose emotional charge. They become tools instead of traps. Acceptance teaches the nervous system that safety exists in the present. Once this is learned, the compulsion to leave the present weakens naturally. The mind time travels because it believes now is insufficient. Acceptance tells the mind that now is enough to be with, even if it is uncomfortable. This is a radical shift. Most people think presence requires effort. They try to force themselves to stay here. This creates tension. True presence arises when resistance ends. When there is nothing to escape from, the mind stays. Emotional time travel is fueled by unfinished business. Regret pulls the mind backward. Worry pulls it forward. Acceptance completes experiences emotionally, even when they remain unresolved intellectually. Completion through acceptance does not require understanding. It requires allowing what is felt to be felt. When you stop resisting an emotion, it moves through. When it moves through, it no longer pulls attention into the past or future. For example, regret is often less about what happened and more about the refusal to accept that it happened. The mind replays the moment, hoping to undo it. Acceptance ends the argument. The replay loses purpose. Worry operates similarly. It assumes the future must be controlled to be safe. Acceptance removes this assumption. You trust your ability to respond rather than predict. Trust collapses rehearsal. The mind rehearses because it does not trust presence. Acceptance builds trust. As trust grows, time begins to feel different. Moments stretch. Attention deepens. You notice small details you used to miss because you were rarely here long enough. This presence is not dull. It is vivid. Many people fear that if they stop replaying and rehearsing, they will become careless. But emotional time travel does not produce wisdom. It produces fatigue. Wisdom arises from clear contact with what is actually happening. Acceptance brings attention back to sensation. The feeling of breath, the weight of the body, the sound in the room. These anchors are not techniques. They are reminders that now exists. When attention rests in sensation, thought slows. Not because it is suppressed, but because it is no longer needed to manage threat. The body relaxes when it is not being dragged through time. This relaxation changes how you experience memory. Memories may still arise, but they feel like images rather than events. They inform without overwhelming. The future still matters, but it does not dominate. You plan when needed, then return. Acceptance creates boundaries around time travel. Without acceptance, the mind lives in loops. It revisits the same moments, rehearses the same fears. With acceptance, loops dissolve. Dissolution does not happen all at once. It happens gradually as the system learns that now is survivable. This learning is somatic. Each time you stay present with discomfort without escaping into thought, the nervous system updates. It learns that feeling is not danger. This learning is profound. It changes baseline experience. Baseline anxiety decreases. Baseline clarity increases. Emotional time travel often feels productive. It feels like you are doing something. Acceptance feels like doing nothing, but doing nothing is sometimes exactly what ends suffering. Doing nothing does not mean disengaging from life. It means disengaging from unnecessary struggle. The mind resists this because it equates activity with value. Stillness feels wasteful, but stillness is where integration happens. Integration allows experience to settle. When experience settles, it stops demanding attention. The mind travels through time because experiences remain unsettled. Acceptance settles them. Settling does not erase pain. It integrates it. Once integrated, pain becomes part of the past rather than a portal back to it. This changes how you relate to identity. You stop defining yourself by what happened or what might happen. You relate to who you are now. Now is not a story. It is an experience. Experience does not require justification. Acceptance also reduces mental noise. The commentary softens. The constant checking decreases. This creates space. In this space, you may notice grief for how much time was spent elsewhere. This grief is natural. It does not need to be fixed. Allow it. It will pass. As it passes, gratitude may arise. Gratitude for being here, for breathing, for simplicity. Gratitude grounds attention. The more grounded attention becomes, the less appealing time travel feels. This does not mean the mind never wanders. Wandering is natural. The difference is that wandering no longer hijacks. You notice sooner, you return gently. There is no punishment, no self-correction, just returning. This gentleness is key. Harshness recreates resistance. Resistance fuels time travel. Gentleness keeps you here. Acceptance also reveals how much emotional time travel was driven by fear of inadequacy, the belief that you must be different to be okay. Acceptance dissolves this belief. You are allowed to be here as you are. This permission removes urgency. Urgency is the engine of time travel. When urgency fades, presence stabilizes. Presence does not eliminate problems. It changes how you meet them. Problems become tasks rather than threats. Tasks are addressed in time. Threats are rehearsed endlessly. Acceptance transforms threats back into tasks. This transformation frees enormous energy. Energy returns to the body. You feel less drained, more alive. Life feels closer. As emotional time travel ends, you may notice something unexpected. Silence. Not external silence, but internal. This silence is not emptiness. It is spacious awareness. Spacious awareness allows choice. Choice allows freedom. Freedom is not about escaping life. It is about staying with it fully. As the mind spends less time replaying the past and rehearsing the future, another pattern quietly steps into the light. A familiar pause. A delay that feels reasonable, even responsible. The thought that says, "not yet." The belief that peace, presence, or acceptance must wait until you are more prepared. This belief feels harmless. It feels wise, but it is one of the most persistent forms of resistance. Readiness is a story the mind tells to justify postponement. It sounds practical, but underneath it carries fear. Fear of feeling too much, fear of failing, fear of losing control. The mind says, "I will accept life once I am stronger, calmer, clearer, more healed." Until then, it holds back. Holding back keeps the nervous system tense. It signals that now is not safe yet, that something is missing, that life must be delayed. But life does not pause while you prepare. The idea of readiness assumes there is a future version of you who will finally be capable of meeting life fully. This future self feels confident, balanced, and unshaken. The present self feels inadequate by comparison. Acceptance is postponed until the upgrade arrives. This postponement creates a subtle self-rejection. You are not allowed to be fully here as you are. You must first become someone else. This belief shapes how you relate to everything. You wait to rest until work is done. You wait to be present until anxiety is gone. You wait to be at peace until circumstances improve. Each wait reinforces the message that now is not enough. The myth of readiness thrives on conditions. It says, once this changes, then I can accept. Once I feel better, then I can be present. Once I understand more, then I can let go. But readiness never arrives because it is not a state. It is a moving target. Each time you think you are close, the mind raises the bar. There is always another reason to wait, another adjustment to make, another layer to fix. This endless preparation keeps you from the very thing you are preparing for. Acceptance does not require readiness, it creates readiness. When you accept life as it is, even while feeling unprepared, something shifts. The body relaxes slightly, the mind stops bracing, capacity increases. Capacity does not come from preparation alone. It comes from contact. Avoidance masquerading as preparation limits growth. Meeting experience builds it. Think about how people learn to swim. No amount of reading prepares the body for water. At some point, contact must happen. The body learns by doing, not by waiting. Life works the same way. You learn to meet emotions by meeting them. You learn to handle uncertainty by standing in it. You learn to be present by being present, not by rehearsing it mentally. The mind fears this because contact feels risky. Preparation feels safer, but safety built on avoidance is fragile. The nervous system becomes resilient through experience, not anticipation. Waiting to be ready also keeps identity intact. As long as you are not fully present, you can maintain the story of who you will become. This story protects you from confronting who you are now. But who you are now is not a problem to solve. It is a reality to meet. Meeting it does not mean approving everything about yourself. It means stopping the delay. Delay drains life. You miss moments while waiting for permission to be present. Readiness also appears in spiritual seeking. People wait for the right teacher, the right practice, the right understanding. They believe that once they know enough, acceptance will be natural. But acceptance is not a reward for understanding. It is the ground that allows understanding to deepen. Trying to understand life before accepting it is like trying to see clearly while squinting. Acceptance opens perception. Readiness closes it. The myth of readiness also shows up in relationships. You wait to be open until you feel safe. You wait to forgive until you receive an apology. You wait to love fully until guarantees are made. These waits keep distance alive. True connection requires vulnerability. Vulnerability does not wait for readiness. It happens in the moment of openness. Openness feels dangerous to the ego because it removes control. But control has already been shown to exhaust the system. Readiness is often just control in disguise. The mind says, once I am ready, I will accept. What it means is, once I feel in control, I will relax. But control is never complete. There is always uncertainty. Acceptance says, I will relax now, even without control. This decision feels radical. It goes against training. You are taught to prepare, plan, and perfect before acting. This training has value in practical matters, but it does not translate to inner peace. Inner peace does not improve with delay. Waiting to be ready also strengthens fear. Each delay reinforces the belief that the experience is dangerous. The mind says, if I am not ready yet, it must be too much. Acceptance disproves this belief through experience. When you accept life before feeling ready, you discover that readiness is not required to be present. You feel what you feel. You breathe, you stay, and nothing collapses. This discovery builds trust. Trust grows not from preparation, but from survival. You trust yourself because you see that you can meet what arises. The myth of readiness also creates perfectionism. You want to accept life the right way. You want to let go correctly. You wait until you feel you can do it properly. But there is no proper way to accept. There is only the willingness to stop resisting. Resistance does not end because conditions improve. Conditions improve because resistance ends. This reversal is hard for the mind to accept. The mind wants acceptance to be an outcome. It is a starting point. Waiting to be ready keeps peace in the future. Acceptance brings it into now. Now may not be comfortable. Acceptance does not promise comfort. It promises honesty. Honesty is grounding. Grounding creates stability. Stability allows capacity to grow. Capacity is often mistaken for readiness, but capacity develops through use. When you accept life before feeling prepared, you stretch gently. You expand without force. This expansion does not feel heroic. It feels ordinary. You stay with a feeling a little longer. You stop distracting. You stop postponing. These small acts accumulate. The nervous system learns that presence is survivable, then tolerable, then natural. The mind learns that readiness is not a prerequisite. It is a result. You do not become ready to accept. You accept, and readiness emerges. This applies even to difficult experiences. Grief does not wait for readiness. Loss does not schedule itself. If acceptance required readiness, peace would be impossible. Yet people survive grief by meeting it as it comes. They do not prepare. They endure. They feel. They adapt. Adaptation happens because acceptance happens. Waiting to be ready also creates a subtle hierarchy of experience. You judge some moments as acceptable and others as premature. This judgment fragments life. Acceptance unifies experience. Everything is included. Inclusion reduces conflict. Conflict drains energy. Energy returns when life is no longer divided into allowed and disallowed moments. This energy supports action. Acceptance does not stop movement. It stops resistance. Movement becomes simpler. You do what is needed now. Readiness often asks for guarantees. Acceptance offers none. It offers presence. Presence is enough. The fear beneath readiness is the fear of inadequacy. The belief that you are not enough yet to meet life. Acceptance challenges this belief directly. It says, you are enough to be here now. This does not mean you are finished. It means you are allowed. Being allowed changes everything. When you allow yourself to meet life before feeling ready, you stop abandoning yourself. You stop standing outside experience, waiting for permission. Permission comes from you. Each moment you choose to stay instead of delay, resistance weakens. Life becomes less intimidating. You realize that readiness was never missing. It was created by avoidance. As avoidance fades, confidence grows quietly. Confidence not in control, but in presence. Presence does not need preparation. It only needs willingness. As the habit of waiting to be ready dissolves, something else becomes easier to notice. A constant pull, a leaning forward of attention, a sense that something is missing and must be found elsewhere. This pull has many names, but it is usually called desire, and it has been misunderstood for a very long time. Desire is often treated as the enemy of peace, something to suppress, control, or rise above. Many teachings frame it as weakness or moral failure, but this framing creates more resistance, not less. When you look more closely, desire is not evil. It is intelligent. It just happens to be looking in the wrong direction. Desire is movement. It is energy. It is awareness trying to complete itself. At its core, desire is the feeling that something is needed for wholeness. The problem is not the energy itself. The problem is where the energy is pointed. When desire points outward, it looks for fulfillment in objects, achievements, people, or states of mind. It says, if I get this, then I will be okay. If I reach that, then I will rest. This outward search keeps awareness moving away from itself. The mind believes satisfaction lives somewhere else, so it keeps reaching. This reaching creates tension. The body leans forward. The breath tightens slightly. Attention narrows. The present moment feels like a waiting room instead of a place to live. Desire promises relief but rarely delivers it for long. Even when you get what you want, the relief fades. Another desire replaces it. This cycle is not a personal failure. It is structural. Desire is awareness mistaking objects for completion. Awareness is naturally whole. It does not lack. But when awareness identifies with thought and story, it forgets itself. It feels incomplete. Desire arises to solve this imagined lack. Craving is not proof that something is wrong with you. It is proof that awareness has turned outward. When you see desire this way, your relationship to it changes. Instead of fighting it, you become curious about it. What is this energy actually seeking? If you listen closely, desire is not asking for the object it claims to want. It is asking for relief, for rest, for wholeness, for peace. But objects cannot provide these permanently because they are impermanent themselves. Desire is intelligence because it is trying to return awareness to fullness. It just uses the wrong map. Suppressing desire does not solve this. Suppression is another form of resistance. It tightens the system and creates shame. Shame fuels more desire. Indulging desire blindly also does not solve it. Indulgence reinforces the belief that fulfillment is external. The cycle continues. Acceptance offers a third option. Not suppression, not indulgence, understanding. When desire arises, instead of acting it out or pushing it away, you stay with the sensation of desire itself. You feel the pull, the warmth, the urgency, without labeling it as bad. This is a radical shift. When you stay with desire without moving toward an object, something unexpected happens. The desire begins to change. It softens, it spreads, it loses its sharp edge. This is because the energy of desire was never meant to move outward. It was meant to return inward. Desire is awareness trying to know itself, but getting distracted by forms. When you turn attention toward the feeling of desire rather than its target, awareness begins to recognize itself again. The sense of lack diminishes. This does not mean desire disappears forever. It means it loses its compulsive quality. Compulsion comes from misunderstanding. Understanding restores choice. The Buddha did not teach the elimination of desire as energy. He taught the ending of craving as attachment. Attachment is desire fused with belief. Belief says, I need this to be complete. When belief drops, desire becomes movement without bondage. Movement without bondage is creativity, curiosity, play. You can still want things, but you no longer believe your worth or peace depends on them. This changes how you live. Desire often shows up as restlessness. You feel uneasy even when nothing is wrong. This restlessness is not boredom, it is displaced awareness. Awareness wants to rest in itself. The mind sends it outward instead. When you accept restlessness instead of escaping it, you discover that it contains stillness inside it. The agitation is surface movement. Beneath it is quiet. This quiet is not achieved, it is revealed. Desire also shows up as comparison. You want what others have. You feel behind. This comparison is awareness measuring itself through forms. Forms are never equal. Comparing them creates suffering. Acceptance dissolves comparison by bringing awareness back to presence. Presence does not compete. Desire is also deeply tied to identity. You want to become someone successful, someone healed, someone awakened. This becoming feels noble, but it carries subtle violence. Becoming says, who you are now is not enough. This belief fuels endless striving. Seeing desire as misplaced intelligence allows becoming to relax. Growth still happens, but it is not driven by self-rejection. Growth becomes organic instead of forced. Desire is not only about wanting more, it is also about wanting less. Wanting pain to end. Wanting fear to go away. Wanting emotions to disappear. These desires come from the same misunderstanding. Awareness thinks peace lies somewhere other than here. Acceptance reveals that peace is not found by removing experience, but by meeting it fully. When awareness meets experience without resistance, desire temporarily loses its job. It no longer needs to push away or pull toward. This does not mean life becomes flat. It becomes intimate. You feel more, but you cling less. Desire also fuels addiction. Addiction is desire that has lost flexibility. It locks onto a specific object and repeats compulsively. Understanding desire does not excuse addiction, it reframes it. Addiction is not moral failure. It is awareness desperately trying to regulate itself through external means. Shame deepens addiction. Acceptance creates the space for healing. Healing happens when awareness learns to return to itself without intermediaries. This return is not mystical. It is felt as presence, as settling, as coming home to sensation. When desire arises and you do not follow it immediately, you create a pause. In that pause, awareness has a chance to reorient. This pause is powerful. The nervous system learns that it does not need to chase relief. Relief is available through presence. This learning reduces urgency. Urgency is the fuel of suffering. As urgency fades, desire becomes information rather than command. You can listen to it without obeying it. This listening reveals patterns. You see what you reach for when you are tired, when you are lonely, when you are afraid. These patterns are not flaws. They are signals. Signals point to needs. Needs are met more effectively through awareness than through compulsion. Desire also has a positive role. It motivates learning, connection, and creativity. When freed from attachment, it becomes life force. Life force moves without desperation. The mistake is not desire. The mistake is believing desire must be satisfied externally to bring peace. Peace does not come from satisfying desire. It comes from understanding it. Understanding dissolves the illusion of lack. Lack is a thought, not a fact. When lack is seen as thought, desire loses its urgency. You can still enjoy, still pursue, still create. But without the belief that something is missing now. This belief is the root of suffering. Acceptance reveals that nothing essential is missing in this moment. This does not deny pain, it contextualizes it. Pain can exist without lack. Difficulty can exist without deficiency. This understanding is liberating. As you live this way, desire becomes lighter, less sticky, less demanding. You may notice long gaps between cravings, or cravings that arise and dissolve quickly. This is not because you controlled them, it is because you understood them. Understanding is the deepest form of letting go. As desire stops pulling awareness outward so forcefully, awareness rests more naturally in itself. This resting feels like contentment without reason. Contentment without reason is peace. This peace does not depend on fulfillment. It exists even while desire comes and goes. As desire loses its grip and no longer pulls awareness outward with the same urgency, a familiar voice often becomes louder for a moment. A voice that comments on everything, judges everything, keeps score. It does not shout, but it never really rests. This is the inner prosecutor, and it has been running the courtroom of your mind for a very long time. The inner prosecutor believes its job is to protect you. It points out mistakes before others can. It criticizes weaknesses so you can fix them. It compares you to ideals so you will improve. On the surface, it looks useful, responsible, even moral. But look deeper, and you will see something else. This voice does not protect peace. It destroys it. Self-judgment is one of the most normalized forms of violence. Because it is internal, it is rarely questioned. You are told that being hard on yourself builds character, that guilt keeps you ethical, that shame motivates change. But none of these are actually true in the long run. The inner prosecutor does not make you better, it keeps you tense. This voice is built on an illusion. The illusion that there is a separate self who can be fixed, improved, or condemned through punishment. Acceptance exposes this illusion by removing the judge's authority. The inner prosecutor speaks in absolutes. Always, never, should. It does not describe behavior. It defines identity. You are lazy. You are broken. You are not enough. Once identity is attacked, the body reacts as if under threat. Shame is not just a thought. It is a full-body experience. The chest collapses, the head drops, energy drains, the nervous system shifts into defense. Learning does not happen here, only contraction. The prosecutor claims this contraction is necessary. It says without judgment, you will become careless or immoral. But this belief confuses accountability with punishment. Accountability arises from clarity. Punishment arises from fear. Acceptance does not remove accountability. It removes unnecessary cruelty. The prosecutor exists because, at some point, criticism felt safer than uncertainty. Many people learned early that love was conditional, approval had to be earned, mistakes had consequences beyond correction, shame became a survival strategy. This strategy may have helped you adapt, but it is no longer serving you. The prosecutor does not live in the present, it lives in memory and projection. It reviews past actions and predicts future failure. It is rarely concerned with what is happening now. Now is too neutral, too alive, too unpredictable. Acceptance pulls attention out of this courtroom and back into direct experience. Direct experience does not judge. It feels, it notices, it responds. When acceptance is present, the prosecutor loses relevance. Not because you argued with it, but because you stopped feeding it. The prosecutor feeds on identification. It needs you to believe its verdicts are truth. Acceptance creates distance. You hear the voice without becoming it. This distance is subtle. It is not dissociation, it is clarity. Clarity reveals that the prosecutor is not you. It is a pattern of thought conditioned by fear and habit. Seeing this clearly is liberating. At first, the prosecutor may get louder. This is normal. When a system senses loss of control, it escalates. It tries to regain authority through intensity. Do not fight it. Fighting creates another courtroom. Instead, notice the tone, the urgency, the harshness. Notice how little compassion lives there. This noticing weakens identification. The prosecutor thrives on secrecy. Awareness exposes it. Acceptance also reveals something uncomfortable. The prosecutor is often fueled by hidden pride, a belief that you should be better than you are, that you should not struggle, that you should have figured it out by now. This pride keeps the prosecutor alive. It says, I expect more from you because you are special. When reality does not meet this expectation, judgment follows. Acceptance dissolves this pride by grounding you in humanity. You are not exempt from difficulty. You are not behind. You are not defective. You are living. Living includes error, confusion, growth, change. The prosecutor rejects this reality. Acceptance embraces it. When you accept your humanity, self-judgment softens. You no longer need to punish yourself for being human. This does not mean you stop learning. Learning becomes gentler, more effective. Mistakes become information rather than evidence of failure. The body responds immediately to this shift. Tension decreases, energy returns, creativity opens. Creativity cannot survive under constant judgment. It requires safety. Safety does not come from perfection. It comes from acceptance. The inner prosecutor also distorts motivation. It uses fear to push you forward. Fear can produce short-term action, but it destroys long-term vitality. Acceptance-based motivation comes from care. You act because you value life, not because you fear punishment. This change in motivation feels lighter, sustainable. The prosecutor also interferes with compassion. When you judge yourself harshly, you judge others harshly, even if silently. Acceptance softens both. You begin to see behavior as conditioned rather than evil. This does not excuse harm, it contextualizes it. Context allows response instead of reaction. The prosecutor is obsessed with fairness. It keeps score, it compares. It demands equal outcomes. But life is not a courtroom, it is a process. Acceptance allows process. The prosecutor demands verdicts. Verdicts freeze movement. Process allows change. When the prosecutor quiets, time feels different. You stop dragging the past forward as evidence. You stop building cases against yourself. The mind becomes quieter not because thoughts disappear, but because hostility disappears. Hostility towards self is exhausting. Ending self-judgment does not require affirmations. It requires recognition. Recognition that the prosecutor is not reality. It is commentary. Commentary can be observed. Observation removes power. This does not happen overnight. The prosecutor has been rehearsed for years. It will return. Each return is an opportunity to see more clearly. Seeing is enough. There is also grief in this process. Grief for how long you believed the prosecutor, how much pain it caused, how many moments were lost to self-attack. Let this grief move. Do not judge it. Grief is part of healing. As the prosecutor loses authority, another quality emerges: self-trust. Self-trust does not mean confidence in outcomes. It means confidence in presence. You trust that you can meet what arises without destroying yourself. This trust is revolutionary. With trust, you no longer need constant evaluation. You can act and adjust. Adjustment is flexible. Judgment is rigid. Life requires flexibility. Acceptance is the soil where flexibility grows. Without the prosecutor, you may fear becoming irresponsible, but responsibility does not come from fear. It comes from care. Care arises naturally when you are not at war with yourself. This care extends outward. You become more patient, less reactive, more present. You do not lose standards, you lose cruelty. Cruelty was never wisdom. The death of the inner prosecutor does not mean silence forever. It means loss of dominance. The voice may still speak, but it is no longer the authority. Awareness becomes the authority. Awareness does not punish. It understands. Understanding leads to change without violence. This is the deepest form of growth. As self-judgment fades, you may notice stillness feels less threatening. Silence feels safer. You no longer need to fill space with correction. Space becomes nourishing. As the inner prosecutor loses its authority and the constant self-attack begins to quiet, something unexpected often happens. Silence appears, space opens, and instead of feeling relief right away, many people feel uneasy, restless, exposed, as if something important is missing. This reaction surprises them. They thought peace would feel safe. Instead, it feels unfamiliar. Stillness feels threatening not because it is dangerous, but because the mind has been trained to distrust it. The conditioned mind learned early that movement equals safety. Thinking, planning, fixing, worrying, judging, these became ways to stay alert. Alertness once mattered. It helped you adapt. It helped you survive. Over time, alertness became constant. Stillness began to feel like vulnerability. The mind equates silence with loss of control. When there is nothing to manage, nothing to fix, nothing to evaluate, the mind does not know where to stand. It feels unnecessary. And what feels unnecessary feels unsafe to an identity built on usefulness. The conditioned mind was rewarded for activity. Productivity was praised. Busyness was admired. Stillness was associated with laziness, weakness, or danger. These associations did not come from wisdom. They came from conditioning. So when peace arrives, the mind reacts as if something has gone wrong. It says, "This can't be right. I should be doing something. I'm missing something." This discomfort is not a sign that stillness is wrong. It is a sign that the mind has not yet learned how to rest. Rest is not inactivity. Rest is the absence of unnecessary effort. The mind is used to effort. It has spent years pushing, correcting, improving, defending. When effort stops, it feels disoriented. The muscles relax, but the identity panics. This panic is subtle. It may show up as boredom, anxiety, or a sudden urge to distract. The phone becomes tempting. Thoughts speed up. Old worries resurface. The mind tries to recreate movement because movement feels familiar. Stillness removes reference points. There is no narrative to hold on to, no problem to solve, no role to perform. For the ego, this feels like erasure. But what is being erased is not awareness. It is noise. Noise was mistaken for aliveness. Many people fear that without constant thinking, they will become dull or disconnected. But thinking is not awareness. Awareness is what notices thinking. Stillness reveals this distinction clearly. When the mind quiets, awareness does not disappear. It becomes more obvious. Sensations sharpen. Sounds become clearer. Presence deepens. Life feels closer, not farther away. But the conditioned mind does not recognize this at first. It expects stimulation to feel alive. Calm feels flat by comparison. This flatness is temporary. It is the system recalibrating. Just as eyes adjust when moving from bright light into a darker room, the nervous system adjusts when moving from constant stimulation into stillness. At first, things seem empty. Then, depth appears. Stillness also brings unresolved sensations to the surface. When the mind stops distracting itself, feelings that were pushed aside may arise. Sadness, fatigue, longing. These feelings were always there, but movement kept them buried. When they surface, the mind may blame stillness. It says, "This calm is making me feel worse." But stillness did not create the feelings. It revealed them. Revelation is uncomfortable when you are used to avoidance. Avoidance feels productive. It feels like control. Stillness removes avoidance. The mind loses its escape routes. This exposure feels threatening because it challenges the belief that you cannot handle what is inside you. But exposure is not overwhelm. It is contact. Contact allows integration. Integration does not happen in motion, it happens in rest. The conditioned mind fears rest because it associates rest with collapse. But collapse happens when effort exceeds capacity. Rest restores capacity. Stillness also threatens the mind's sense of importance. When you stop thinking, you stop narrating your significance. The story quiets. You are no longer the hero or the victim. You simply are. This simplicity feels insignificant to the ego. The ego wants meaning to be loud and obvious. Stillness offers meaning without noise. This kind of meaning is subtle. It does not announce itself, it must be felt. Feeling requires slowing down. Slowing down reveals how fast the mind was moving. Many people discover only in stillness how exhausted they truly are. This realization can be unsettling. The mind resists because it does not want to acknowledge fatigue. Fatigue feels like failure in a culture that values endurance. But fatigue is information. It tells you that effort exceeded rest. Stillness allows the body to speak. The body speaks through sensation, not language. It releases tension. It adjusts breathing. It softens posture. These changes signal healing. Healing feels unfamiliar when you are used to strain. Strain creates identity. You know who you are when you are struggling. You lose that reference in stillness. This loss is temporary. A new reference emerges. Presence. Presence does not need to prove itself. It does not perform. It witnesses. Witnessing feels passive to the ego, but it is active awareness. Awareness is not idle. It is receptive. Receptivity is strength without aggression. The conditioned mind distrusts receptivity because it equates it with vulnerability. But vulnerability is not weakness, it is openness. Openness allows connection with yourself, with others, with life. Stillness also exposes the habit of constant self-monitoring. You may notice how often you check your state. Am I okay? Am I doing this right? Stillness removes feedback loops. Without feedback, the mind feels lost. But being lost is not always negative. Sometimes it means you are no longer following a false map. The mind fears stillness because stillness dissolves illusions. Illusions about control, illusions about identity, illusions about permanence. Without these illusions, the ego feels naked. This nakedness is not danger, it is honesty. Honesty feels sharp at first, then it feels clean. Stillness cleans perception by removing filters. Filters were built to protect, but they distort. When distortion fades, clarity arises naturally. Clarity does not require effort. It emerges when noise stops. This emergence cannot be forced. It happens when stillness is allowed. Allowing stillness does not mean liking it immediately. It means staying. Staying through discomfort teaches the nervous system something new. That quiet does not equal threat. That presence does not equal loss. This learning is gradual. Each time you stay, the discomfort shortens. The urge to escape weakens. Over time, stillness begins to feel supportive rather than threatening. You may notice that you no longer need constant stimulation. Silence becomes nourishing. Being alone feels less lonely. Loneliness often comes from being disconnected from yourself. Stillness reconnects. The conditioned mind also fears stillness because it removes distraction from existential questions. Questions about meaning, mortality, and purpose may arise. These questions feel heavy when avoided. In stillness, they soften. They do not demand answers. They become part of the mystery. Mystery is uncomfortable for a mind trained to solve, but mystery is where humility lives. Humility relaxes the nervous system because it removes the burden of certainty. You do not need to know everything to be at peace. Stillness teaches this directly. When you rest in stillness, you experience being without knowing, and nothing bad happens. This experience rewires belief. Belief that you must always be doing something to be okay dissolves. Belief that silence is dangerous dissolves. Belief that peace must feel exciting dissolves. Peace begins to feel safe. Safe does not mean static. Stillness does not freeze life. It supports movement. From stillness, action becomes clearer. You move when needed, you stop when not. This rhythm feels natural. The conditioned mind resists rhythm because it wants control over timing. Stillness trusts timing. Trusting timing reduces anxiety. Anxiety thrives on urgency. Stillness removes urgency. When urgency drops, compassion increases. You become less reactive, more patient. Patience is not delay, it is spaciousness. Spaciousness allows choice. Choice allows freedom. Freedom does not mean constant happiness. It means you are not pushed around by discomfort. Stillness builds this freedom. It does so quietly, without spectacle. This is why it is often overlooked. But once the nervous system learns that stillness is safe, peace stops feeling threatening. It starts feeling like refuge, not escape. Refuge, a place you can return to. As stillness begins to feel less threatening and more like refuge, something subtle becomes visible. A tiny gap most people never notice. A brief pause where nothing is wrong yet. A space that exists before the mind steps in to explain, judge, or label. This space is where peace either survives or disappears. Life itself does not speak in words. It arrives as sensation, sound, movement, and feeling. Meaning comes later. Meaning is added. And the moment meaning is added, suffering often begins. There is always a difference between what happens and what you say about what happens. The event and the story are not the same. The body experiences the event. The mind interprets it. Confusion arises when interpretation is mistaken for reality. Experience is neutral before meaning touches it. Sensation has no opinion. A tight chest is just pressure. A fast heartbeat is just rhythm. Sadness is heaviness. Fear is energy. None of these say anything about who you are or what your life means. Meaning arrives only when the mind speaks. The mind is fast. It interprets almost instantly, so quickly that most people never notice the raw experience beneath the interpretation. The mind says, "This is bad, this is dangerous, this should not be happening." In that moment, suffering is born. Suffering is not caused by sensation, it is caused by conclusion. The mind believes interpretation is necessary for survival. It thinks labeling helps you respond. Sometimes it does. Often it does not. When interpretation becomes automatic, it replaces observation. You stop seeing what is actually happening and start reacting to what you think it means. This is where acceptance becomes transformative. Acceptance slows the process. It keeps attention with experience long enough for meaning to soften or not form at all. Observation stays with sensation. Interpretation jumps to narrative. Narrative feels helpful because it creates coherence. But coherence is not always truth. It is often habit. The mind uses past experiences to interpret the present. If something once hurt, similar sensations are labeled as danger. This happens even when conditions have changed. For example, tension in the body may be interpreted as failure or weakness, but tension may simply be fatigue or emotion moving. The meaning creates suffering where none existed. Acceptance invites you to notice sensation without immediately deciding what it means. This does not require effort, it requires curiosity. Curiosity says, what is actually happening right now? This question keeps awareness in the present. It prevents time travel. It prevents identity from attaching. When you stay with sensation, something surprising happens. Sensation changes. It moves. It intensifies or fades. Meaning, on the other hand, freezes it. When you say, "This means I am broken," the sensation tightens. The body responds to the meaning, not the sensation. Stress hormones increase, muscles contract. The experience becomes heavier. Meaning has power because the body believes it. The body does not understand language, but it understands threat. Meaning often signals threat. Acceptance removes threat by removing interpretation. This does not mean you never interpret. It means you do not confuse interpretation with reality. Reality is what is felt. Meaning is what is thought. When you see this clearly, you gain choice. You can allow meaning to arise without obeying it. This space between experience and meaning is where freedom lives. Most people collapse this space. They live as if experience and meaning are one. They say, "I feel anxious, therefore something is wrong. I feel sad, therefore life is bad." These conclusions feel logical, but are not inevitable. Acceptance reopens the space. In that space, you can feel anxiety without panic. You can feel sadness without despair. You can feel anger without violence. The feeling remains. The suffering does not multiply. Multiplication happens when meaning adds layers. The original sensation may be uncomfortable, but the added story creates suffering. For example, physical pain hurts. The story that it should not be happening, that it will never end, that it means something is wrong with you, creates suffering. Acceptance does not remove pain. It removes the extra layer. The Buddha described this as the second arrow. The first arrow is the pain of life. The second arrow is the pain you add through resistance and interpretation. Acceptance drops the second arrow. Dropping the second arrow does not require understanding everything. It requires staying with what is felt without jumping to what it means. This staying is not passive. It is attentive. Attentive presence reveals details. Sensation has texture, movement, temperature. These details ground awareness in experience. Grounding prevents escalation. Escalation happens when the mind runs ahead. The mind often believes it must explain to protect. But explanation is not the same as response. Response arises from clarity. Clarity comes from observation. Interpretation clouds clarity. When you observe without rushing to meaning, patterns reveal themselves naturally. You see how sensations rise and fall. You notice how thoughts follow sensation, not the other way around. This reverses a common belief. People think thoughts create feelings. Often feelings arise first, and thoughts explain them later. Understanding this changes your relationship to thought. Thought is commentary, not command. Meaning is suggestion, not fact. When you see this, suffering loosens. The space between experience and meaning is also the space where compassion lives. When you stop interpreting your own sensations harshly, you stop interpreting others harshly. You see behavior as response to experience rather than moral failure. This does not excuse harm, it contextualizes it. Context allows wisdom. Wisdom responds appropriately instead of reacting blindly. This space also reveals how quickly the mind personalizes experience. It says, "This is happening to me. This means something about me." Acceptance removes the personal reference. Experience happens. Conditions arise. They are not commentary on your worth. This realization reduces shame. Shame is interpretation layered on sensation. Acceptance allows sensation to exist without identity attached. Without identity, sensation passes more easily. Identity sticks experience. This is why acceptance is so powerful. It prevents identification at the root. Most people think acceptance is about emotion. It is actually about meaning. When you accept, you stop forcing meaning onto experience. This does not make life meaningless. It makes meaning flexible. Meaning becomes something you can engage with rather than something that controls you. The mind often resists this because it wants certainty, it wants conclusions, it wants clarity now. But clarity born of interpretation is fragile. Clarity born of observation is stable. Observation reveals what interpretation hides. For example, you may observe that sadness feels heavy but also soft, that it comes in waves, that it changes with breath. These observations reduce fear. Fear comes from not knowing what is happening. Observation creates familiarity. Familiarity reduces threat. Acceptance is not about convincing yourself that everything is okay. It is about seeing clearly that experience does not need justification. Experience is allowed to exist. Meaning can come later or not at all. When meaning is not forced, it often emerges organically. It is quieter, more accurate. This kind of meaning does not create suffering. It supports understanding. The space between experience and meaning also ends rumination. Rumination is the mind looping through interpretations, trying to resolve discomfort. Observation ends loops by staying with what is actually present. Presence short-circuits unnecessary thinking. The nervous system relaxes when thinking slows. Relaxation improves perception. Improved perception reduces misinterpretation. This creates a virtuous cycle. You begin to trust experience without immediately explaining it. Trust reduces fear. Fear drives interpretation. When fear fades, interpretation softens. Acceptance builds this trust gradually. Each time you feel something without labeling it, you strengthen awareness. Each time you notice interpretation without believing it, you weaken suffering. This is a practice, not a destination. Some moments you will interpret quickly. That is human. Acceptance includes this too. Do not judge yourself for interpreting. Judgment is just another layer of meaning. Simply notice. Return to sensation, and this returning builds stability. Stability allows presence. Presence reveals freedom. Freedom is not found in meaning. It is found in awareness. Awareness holds meaning lightly. When you live this way, life feels less heavy. You carry fewer conclusions. You stop turning every sensation into a verdict. Verdicts create prisons. Observation creates space. In that space, you can feel deeply without drowning. You can think clearly without clinging. You can respond wisely without rushing. This is not a mystical state. It is a natural function of awareness when not interrupted. Acceptance protects this function. As the space between experience and meaning becomes clearer, another fear quietly arises. If you stop interpreting harshly, if you stop resisting what is, does that mean you must accept everything and everyone without limits? Does acceptance mean tolerating harm, disrespect, or losing yourself in the name of compassion? This fear keeps many people guarded, confused, and emotionally exhausted. Acceptance of others is one of the most misunderstood practices. Many people swing between two extremes. They either resist others constantly, trying to change them, fix them, or judge them, or they collapse into self-abandonment, tolerating behavior that hurts them because they believe compassion requires it. Both paths create suffering. True acceptance lives somewhere else entirely. Accepting others as they are does not mean agreeing with them. It does not mean staying silent. It does not mean surrendering your needs. It means seeing clearly who they are, how they are, and what they are capable of in this moment, without demanding they be different before you allow yourself to be at peace. Boundaries are not the opposite of acceptance. They are its natural companion. When you accept someone fully, you stop arguing with reality. You see their patterns, their limitations, their fears, and their conditioning. This clarity allows you to respond wisely instead of react emotionally. Reaction comes from expectation. Response comes from understanding. Most conflict arises because we expect others to meet needs they cannot meet. We expect awareness where there is none, accountability where there is avoidance, sensitivity where there is defensiveness. When they fail, we feel hurt and betrayed. Acceptance removes this illusion. When you see someone clearly, you stop hoping they will become someone else. This does not make you cold. It makes you grounded. Grounded compassion does not beg for change. It adapts. Adaptation is not surrender. It is intelligence. When you accept that someone is emotionally unavailable, you stop exposing yourself repeatedly, hoping for a different outcome. You do not punish them. You do not shame them. You simply adjust how close you stand. This adjustment is a boundary. Boundaries are often misunderstood as walls. In reality, they are doors. They define where connection is safe and where it is not. Without boundaries, acceptance becomes self-erasure. Self-erasure breeds resentment. Resentment is compassion betrayed. Many people fear boundaries because they were taught that love requires sacrifice, that being kind means enduring discomfort, that saying no is selfish. These beliefs distort compassion into martyrdom. Martyrdom is not love. It is avoidance of conflict with self. Acceptance with boundaries says, I see you as you are, and I will not harm myself to stay close to you. This stance is deeply respectful. It honors both realities. It also removes manipulation. When you stop trying to change others, you stop using guilt, pressure, or withdrawal to get your needs met. Communication becomes cleaner. Clean communication does not mean pleasant communication. It means honest. Honesty grounded in acceptance is calm. It does not need to convince. When you accept others, you stop taking their behavior personally. You recognize that their actions arise from their internal state, not your worth. This reduces emotional reactivity. Reduced reactivity makes boundaries easier to hold. Boundaries held with anger invite conflict. Boundaries held with clarity invite respect, even if they are not liked. Acceptance also frees you from over-explaining. You do not need others to understand your boundary for it to be valid. You do not need agreement to honor yourself. This is where many people get stuck. They believe compassion requires consensus. It does not. Compassion requires presence. Presence allows you to feel empathy without losing orientation. Empathy without boundaries becomes enmeshment. Enmeshment confuses responsibility. You start carrying emotions that are not yours. Acceptance clarifies responsibility. You are responsible for your actions, your choices, your boundaries. You are not responsible for regulating someone else's emotions. When you accept others, you stop trying to manage their reactions. This is liberating. Trying to manage others is exhausting because it is impossible. Acceptance removes this burden. This does not mean you stop caring how your actions affect others. It means you stop controlling how they feel about it. This distinction is essential. Boundaries grounded in acceptance are flexible. They adjust with context. They are not rigid rules. They are living responses. Rigidity comes from fear. Flexibility comes from trust. Trust that you can respond to what arises. When you accept someone's limitations, you stop fighting them, but you also stop asking them to give what they cannot. This prevents repeated disappointment. Disappointment comes from expectation, not reality. Acceptance dissolves expectation. This does not mean you lower standards. It means you stop expecting someone to meet standards they have not shown capacity for. Standards remain internal. Expectations become realistic. This realism is kindness. Acceptance also changes how you listen. You hear what people are actually saying, not what you wish they meant. This prevents misinterpretation. Misinterpretation fuels conflict. Clear seeing reduces drama. Drama thrives on projection. Acceptance removes projection. When you stop projecting who someone should be, you see who they are. This clarity allows you to choose proximity wisely. Choice replaces obligation. Obligation breeds resentment. Choice builds respect. Many people confuse acceptance with passivity. They think accepting someone means staying in harmful situations. This is false. Acceptance allows you to leave without hatred. Leaving without hatred is powerful. Hatred keeps you bound to the situation emotionally. Acceptance frees you. You can walk away without needing the other person to be wrong. This is maturity. Acceptance also allows compassion without collapse. You can understand someone's pain without absorbing it. You can acknowledge their struggle without fixing it. Fixing is often a way to avoid discomfort. Acceptance stays present with discomfort without taking ownership of it. This presence can be healing without self-sacrifice. In relationships, acceptance with boundaries creates safety. Safety allows honesty. Honesty deepens connection. Without boundaries, honesty feels dangerous. Acceptance also helps you forgive without reconciling. Forgiveness releases emotional burden. Reconciliation requires trust and change. These are different processes. Many people stay in harmful relationships because they confuse forgiveness with access. Acceptance clarifies this distinction. You can accept someone fully and still choose distance. Distance is not rejection, it is care. Care for yourself and for the reality of the other. Boundaries also protect compassion from burnout. Without boundaries, compassion becomes depletion. You give until you have nothing left. Depletion breeds bitterness. Acceptance ensures compassion remains sustainable. It allows you to say yes when you mean yes and no when you mean no. Clarity replaces guilt. Guilt often arises when boundaries are set from fear. Acceptance dissolves guilt by aligning action with reality. When you accept your own needs, boundaries feel natural. Self-acceptance is the foundation of accepting others. Without self-acceptance, boundaries feel like aggression. With self-acceptance, boundaries feel like honesty. Acceptance also changes conflict. Conflict becomes information rather than threat. You listen more. You defend less. Defensiveness comes from fear of being wrong. Acceptance removes the need to be right. You can hear criticism without collapsing or attacking. You can respond without escalating. This does not mean you tolerate abuse. Abuse requires boundaries, sometimes firm ones. Acceptance does not weaken boundaries, it strengthens them. Boundaries set without acceptance are fueled by anger. Boundaries set with acceptance are fueled by clarity. Clarity is stable. Acceptance also prevents you from abandoning yourself to keep peace. Peace built on self-abandonment is fragile. True peace includes you. Including yourself in compassion is not selfish, it is necessary. Many people grew up learning to prioritize others to stay safe. Acceptance helps unwind this conditioning. You learn that you can care without disappearing. This is liberation. As acceptance of others deepens, you may notice less internal conflict. You stop rehearsing conversations. You stop arguing mentally. Mental peace increases. This peace is not withdrawal. It is engagement without entanglement. Entanglement confuses where you end and others begin. Acceptance clarifies edges. Clear edges allow genuine closeness. Without edges, closeness becomes fusion. Fusion destroys individuality. Acceptance honors individuality. This honors difference without hostility. You do not need others to be like you to respect them. Respect does not require agreement. Acceptance allows coexistence. Coexistence reduces suffering. As you live this way, relationships become simpler. Not always easier, but clearer. Clarity is kind. Kindness grounded in clarity is strong. This strength allows you to stay open without being consumed. As acceptance settles into relationships without self-abandonment, something subtle begins to take over. You stop forcing insight. You stop trying to figure everything out. And strangely, clarity starts appearing on its own. Not as loud conclusions, but as quiet knowing. This is the moment many people miss because they are still looking for wisdom instead of allowing it. Wisdom does not arrive through struggle. It arrives when struggle ends. Most people believe clarity is something you earn by thinking harder, analyzing longer, or pushing through confusion. They treat wisdom like a prize at the end of effort. But wisdom is not created by effort. It is revealed when effort relaxes. Non-resistance removes interference. Interference is the constant mental noise of fixing, judging, comparing, and controlling. When this noise quiets, perception sharpens. You begin to see what was always there, but drowned out by urgency. This is why insight often comes in moments of surrender, in the shower, on a walk, late at night when you stop trying. The mind is relaxed enough to let understanding surface. Understanding does not come from force, it comes from alignment. When you stop resisting what is, you stop distorting it. Distortion requires tension. Clarity requires openness. Non-resistance allows reality to show itself without filters. You see patterns instead of fragments. You notice timing instead of chaos. You sense when to act and when to wait without needing justification. This sensing feels intuitive, but it is not mysterious. It is the nervous system functioning without threat. Threat narrows perception. Safety widens it. When you are resisting life, the body is tense. The brain prioritizes survival over insight. It scans for danger, not meaning. Non-resistance signals safety, allowing higher perception to come online. This is biological, not mystical. Wisdom emerges when the system is regulated. Many people confuse wisdom with intelligence. Intelligence processes information. Wisdom integrates experience. Integration requires stillness. Stillness allows experiences to settle into understanding. When you stop fighting emotions, they complete themselves. When they complete, they leave information behind. That information becomes wisdom. Incomplete emotions distort perception. Completed emotions clarify it. This is why suppressing or indulging emotions delays wisdom. Both interrupt the natural cycle. Non-resistance allows the cycle to finish. As cycles complete, the mind becomes less cluttered, less reactive, more spacious. In this space, insight feels obvious, not dramatic, obvious. You realize what matters and what does not without debating it. You stop chasing answers and start trusting discernment. Discernment is wisdom in motion. Discernment does not argue. It chooses quietly. This quiet choosing is often mistaken for passivity, but it is precise. You act with less effort and better timing. Effortless action is a hallmark of wisdom. This does not mean action disappears. It becomes aligned. Alignment means your thoughts, emotions, and actions point in the same direction. Resistance fractures this alignment. Non-resistance restores it. Restored alignment feels like ease. Ease is not laziness. It is efficiency without strain. The ego resists this because it equates effort with value. It believes that if something feels easy, it must be shallow. But depth does not require tension. Depth requires openness. Water is deep because it yields. Wisdom yields to reality instead of pushing against it. When you stop resisting, you stop insisting on your version of events. You become available to what is actually happening. Availability allows learning. Learning that comes from availability is embodied. It changes behavior without needing reminders. You do not have to remember wisdom. You live it. This is why non-resistance feels like intelligence returning home. You stop second-guessing. You stop over-explaining. You stop rehearsing. The mind quiets not because you forced it, but because it has nothing left to argue with. Arguments require opposition. Non-resistance removes opposition. Without opposition, thought becomes functional instead of compulsive. Functional thought solves practical problems and then rests. Compulsive thought keeps working even when nothing needs to be done. Wisdom knows when to stop. This stopping is not withdrawal, it is completion. Completion feels satisfying without excitement. Excitement seeks more. Satisfaction rests. Rest is where wisdom integrates. Many people fear resting because they think momentum will be lost. But momentum created by struggle is unstable. Momentum created by clarity is sustainable. When struggle stops, energy is conserved. That energy supports insight. Insight is not something new entering the mind, it is confusion leaving. Confusion leaves when resistance ends. This is why wisdom feels familiar, like remembering rather than learning. You recognize truth instead of discovering it. Recognition is quiet. Recognition does not announce itself. It settles. You may notice fewer internal debates, fewer mental negotiations. Decisions feel simpler. Simple does not mean easy emotionally. It means clear. Clear decisions can still be difficult, but they do not feel confused. Confusion drains, clarity steadies. Non-resistance also changes how you handle uncertainty. Instead of panicking, you pause, you listen, you allow the situation to reveal itself. This patience is not passive, it is attentive. Attentive waiting is a form of wisdom. Wisdom does not rush clarity, it allows it. Rushing comes from fear. Fear collapses perception. Allowing expands it. This expansion reveals connections you would miss when pushing. You notice how one thing leads naturally to another. You see cause and effect without forcing conclusions. This seeing dissolves blame. Blame narrows. Understanding widens. Understanding does not excuse harm. It informs response. Response guided by wisdom is measured. It uses appropriate force when needed and restraint when needed. Appropriate force does not come from anger, it comes from clarity. Anger distorts timing. Clarity times action well. This is why non-resistance does not make you weak, it makes you accurate. Accuracy is strength without aggression. When resistance falls away, you also stop resisting yourself. You trust your capacity to meet life. This trust allows intuition to function. Intuition is not guesswork. It is rapid integration of experience. Integration requires quiet. Noise blocks intuition. Non-resistance reduces noise. As noise fades, intuition sharpens. You begin to sense subtle signals. A tightening that says no. A lightness that says yes. A pause that says wait. These signals were always present. They were ignored in favor of thought. Thought is slower than intuition when clarity is present. This does not mean abandoning reason. It means reason works with intuition instead of against it. Together they form wisdom. Wisdom does not need to prove itself. It does not need validation. Validation seeking is a sign of doubt. Non-resistance dissolves doubt by grounding you in experience. Experience teaches faster than theory. The more you live without resistance, the more confidence grows. Not confidence in outcomes, but confidence in response. You know you will respond appropriately when the time comes. This knowing reduces anxiety. Anxiety is fear of not knowing how to respond. Wisdom removes this fear. You no longer need to pre-solve life. Life unfolds. You meet it. This meeting feels intimate, alive. You stop standing outside life trying to manage it. You stand inside it, participating. Participation feels meaningful without effort. Meaning arises naturally when you are engaged without resistance. This meaning does not require explanation. You feel it as coherence. Coherence is the felt sense that things make sense even without answers. This sense is deeply calming. Calm allows insight. Insight informs action. Action reinforces trust. Trust deepens non-resistance. This creates a self-supporting cycle. As this cycle strengthens, wisdom becomes less event-based and more continuous. You are not waiting for moments of clarity. You live from it. This does not make life predictable. It makes it navigable. Navigation does not require control. It requires awareness. Awareness is always available when struggle stops. Struggle consumes attention. Non-resistance frees it. Freed attention naturally aligns with truth. Truth is not an idea. It is what remains when distortion ends. Distortion ends when resistance ends. This is the simplest and most difficult teaching. Simple because nothing needs to be added. Difficult because something must be dropped. Dropping struggle feels like loss at first. Then it feels like relief. Then it feels like home. From this home you begin to see that some wounds do not heal through effort or understanding at all. They heal only when you stop trying to repair them. Peace was never waiting on the other side of effort. It was never hidden in control, improvement, or understanding. It was here the moment the fight stopped. Throughout this journey, one truth kept revealing itself again and again. Suffering did not come from life being difficult. It came from resisting what was already here. From saying this shouldn't be happening. From trying to fix, rush, control, judge, or escape the present moment. We saw how resistance creates invisible pain, how acceptance is not weakness, not permission, not giving up, how the mind clings to familiar suffering because uncertainty feels threatening, how control once protected you but now quietly exhausts you, how emotions are weather, not identity, how pride hides inside resistance, how the body learns peace before the mind ever understands it. We explored how stories about who you are keep you trapped, how perfectionism blocks clarity, how inner war plants the seeds of future suffering, and how trusting impermanence frees you, even from clinging to happiness itself. We saw why peace can feel like failure, why closure is not required for healing, why time travel through past and future drains your life, why waiting to be ready delays freedom, why desire is not wrong but misdirected. Why self-judgment is an illusion, why stillness can feel unsafe, and how suffering begins the moment meaning replaces observation. And finally we arrived here, at the quiet truth that wisdom appears on its own. When struggle ends, nothing needed to be added, only released. If one idea stayed with you, one moment that softened something inside, write, "I choose acceptance" in the comments. Not for me, but as a signal to yourself. If this helped you see life differently, even slightly, support the channel by subscribing. More reflections like this are coming, and you don't have to walk this path alone. Until next time, remember this: life does not need your resistance to unfold. Peace begins the moment you stop arguing with what is.